Welcome back to the State of the Arc podcast. My name is Mike.
My name's Kason.
And today we're talking about Disc 2 of Final Fantasy VIII, which begins after the assassination attempt on Edea and will result in another assassination attempt on Edea.
That is what happens at the end. It's kind of funny.
The end of Disc 1 and 2 are the same.
It would be a great bookend. I was surprised too when I saw it said insert Disc 3, and I was like, oh, this is the exact same thing.
Yep, we tried to kill Edea twice.
Jeez.
All right.
Second time went a little bit different though.
I was surprised, you also said this to me, at how much is in Disc 2.
Yeah,
it's
a lot.
Kind of insane.
It took me, I was like, Disc 2, Disc 1, same-ish, but once they get you into that open world, kind of, you can go wherever you want, I started spending way too much time, and I finally got into the card game. Remember last time we talked, I was avoiding it.
Yep.
I got pretty into it, and anyways, a lot of the time, I spent a ton of time on Disc 2, way more than I thought it would.
Yeah, me too. I was kind of surprised, because I've been trying to do as much of the side quests and trying to get as much like background and detail on like the lore and the world and stuff like that as I could.
Me too. I went back to the seed, kind of the diary and the desk, in the classroom, and I just read all of that stuff, and that was fascinating.
Let's jump into it.
All right.
All right. Let's just get started with. We can pass it back and forth, summarizing what happens here on Disc 2.
So right away, you're playing as Laguna, which once again I thought, when I first played the game, I was just like this Laguna stuff. It's not until the end that you really get the connection, but this Laguna business is crazy. Beginning Disc 2, you're not even playing as your main character. You're playing as Laguna. But it's fascinating because a lot of time has passed. It's been however long since he kind of left the military.
I think a year since that scene where they fell over the...
Yes, since that scene. But that scene, the timing of things is a little bit weird when you start seeing Laguna and you start realizing things aren't necessarily happening like in order, at least as far as I can tell. Because, we can talk about that later. But there's a little girl now.
Yeah.
Her name's Ellone or Ellone.
I don't know how that's pronounced. And here's
I
the
always
thing
said
about pronunciations. I'm going to just forever forego talking about how it should be pronounced.
Japanese
because
or whatever,
we'll get response in the comments like, yeah, I get that. Okay, fine. Like, I don't know Japanese. I'm not talking about it anymore. Pronounce it however the frick you want. It is a weird name.
It's a weird name, but I felt like it was kind of symbolic because she is alone.
Maybe that is. I mean, that's kind of the thing with Aerith's name, right?
Ah, yes.
The reason why it's supposed to be TH instead of S is because it's supposed to be like Earth. She has a connection to the Earth,
that's it,
right? So that's why it's Aerith and not Eris.
Not Eris.
Technically.
So
well, maybe that is alone. I don't know. Whatever.
Once again, just not getting into names. Ellone is good enough. So there's this little adorable little girl, and Laguna's protecting her. We don't really know why. He got rescued by this bartender girl named Rain, and she's kind of like helping him out, and in return, he like protects the village because he's got military experience and stuff. And so he's just been doing that for like a long time, and he's really, really happy doing it.
I love that connection that they've built between Ellone and Laguna. They're talking to each other, and Rain is kind of like scolding her. The little girl a little
for
bit.
going outside,
and she's like, "Oh, I got in trouble."
Yes,
and then she ends up saying something to Laguna, kind of coming down hard on him, and he tells her, like, "Oh, I got in trouble." And so they have this little dynamic connection between them that is really charming. I think it's very indicative of what Final Fantasy VIII in particular gets completely right with its writing, is like this banter. Back and forth characters relating to each other, dynamic between characters, the cast balancing each other, being consistently very
funny. And being
funny.
Consistent, yeah.
And I think it's just really charming stuff.
What's funny about Laguna's character is that he's so tight with this little 4 or 5-year-old girl. I don't know how old she is, but she's young. She's very young. And he's so like good with her, and she's just like, she loves him. And also we find out that the Shumi little lion people like really like Laguna too.
Yeah.
And he's not so good with people his age. He's not so good with adults and formal, business stand-up respectable people. But he's so good because he's just all heart,
Yeah.
He's so good with children and with animals that seem like like puppies, basically, that are like less than human. Yeah,
the Moomba. You said Shumi, but it's actually true that Shumi can transform into. We'll get to that later.
That's their final
Shumi
stage.
transform into
the
Moombas.
Moomba. Yeah, that's what I meant.
Right. Yeah.
But he just has this connection with these beings that you would generally consider to be of lesser intelligence.
Yeah.
And that's when he shines, and you can tell he's not the smartest guy himself, but there's like something about him that people can just latch on to, not on an intellectual level, but on an emotional
level. An aura about him,
yeah.
Some kind of sense that he gives off that people just trust him.
And like you mentioned, his little banter with Ellone is like, that kind of embodies that. You kind of feel that a little bit. And you feel how sincere he is. Like he really cares about people. When he gets close to somebody, whether it's the girl at the hotel, I can't remember her name, or it's Rain, or it's Ellone, or it's, the Moombas that he worked with or whatever, they can feel that, and you can just tell, and it's really well. They show it really well, but he's really, really connected. He's really loyal.
And
he's really tight with people.
We mentioned this last week, but a perfect foil or counterbalance to Squall, right?
Yes.
Which was his whole purpose. Is they were worried that Squall was too alienating for a lot of players who are going to play that who might not necessarily completely relate to him. Oh, I don't like him. But you're going to like Laguna no matter what. Everyone likes Laguna.
Basically, no matter what.
Everybody likes Laguna.
Yeah.
You can't hate Laguna.
Nope.
So, yeah, good stuff.
I try to, though, because I'm like, I didn't understand him. I didn't get why he was there. I wanted to play Squall. I didn't want to play as Laguna.
Yeah.
This newest playthrough, though, I love the scenes with Laguna, so.
Yeah. And then he goes over to the bar, and Kyros ends up showing up.
Yeah, Kyros shows up.
And
they start protecting the village together.
Yeah, the conversation that they have with each other, kind of catching us up on what's happened since they left Galbadian military. But there's some key sort of hints dropped about like the nature of these dreams. I mean, eventually they state it outright, like what's happening. But this might be a good time to bring up some of like the hints along the way that they've left about like what this dream world they're seeing actually is.
Yes.
Because, I mean, if you remember the very first one, it was on the train
to the jungle, right? Yeah.
It was on the train to Timber. And right before it happens, Zell basically explains to Squall the Timber's situation. Right. Timber used to be an independent country. It was invaded by Galbadia 18 years ago or something like that. And then immediately after that, you go into a dream sequence where I think Ward says, hey, aren't we supposed to be fighting the Timber army?
Right.
Suggesting that
it's like relevant in some way.
It's independent. Timber is its own nation with its own army, not a, what do you call it, the opposite of sovereign. Subordinate nation, a subservient nation to Galbadia.
So that lets you know that we're dealing with something in the past.
In the past, right.
Like
this happened a long time ago.
Yeah.
Now, that's a very, very small thing that you might have easily missed on a first playthrough, right?
Well, I did.
But there's a lot of other hints that they drop along the way that suggest that this happened in the past.
Yeah.
Also, if you select the grayed out text, so in all the options where Laguna has something that he can reply as, a lot of times there will be a grayed option, which is actually Squall's thoughts, not Laguna's.
Yeah.
And you may or may not in your playthrough have chosen to select the grayed options, right? So you might have missed this. But if you do, it's always something that Laguna's kind of like that wasn't my thought. And he starts mentioning something about the fairies.
Yes.
F-A-E-R-I-S. Fairies. There's some kind of, something is like suggesting things to my brain that I didn't think, that I didn't want to say or whatever.
And we find out later on in this disc that the reason we're having these hallucinations in the first place is because someone is trying to change the past, is trying to affect it directly through some other way, but they're trying to alter the past, which is why Laguna can, to some degree, actually sense that's going on.
Like Squall and Zell and Selphie or whoever else is viewing these dreams, they aren't just passively watching it through the eyes of the individual people, through either Laguna or Kyros or Ward, right? Their thoughts have some ability to affect what they do or say. They can't like directly control their bodies necessarily, but they can at least have some level of like psychological suggestion to whatever degree that is. What Squall is thinking in the future is affecting what Laguna is thinking in his time, and it is to some degree having some effect.
Right.
But to what degree that is, we will get to in much more detail in a later episode when we really get into the meat of how time is handled in this story.
Oh gosh, especially in Discord.
We're not quite there yet.
Yeah.
Where we've had it all sort of unfold and explained and where we can really dig into it. But it's nice, at least at this point, to be paying attention to the hints that they're dropping about the fact that Squall and company are getting sent somehow back in time and have some ability to influence what these characters are thinking, or what pops in their mind, or suggests what But the problem is that Squall and company, they have no idea what they're supposed to be helping to change.
They don't really get any of this.
So it's like they're all kind of helpless. All three of the 18 years ago party members and the modern day party members have no idea what's happening and can't really figure out what whoever is making this happen is trying to get them to do.
Right.
So,
which may be intentional.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, you don't want to change the past completely, right?
Right.
Because that would change the future. You just got to slightly hint it or adjust it a little bit.
Yeah, and in addition to that, it's also interesting that the GFs that you have equipped on Squall and Zell or whoever are the same GFs that are equipped on them in the past.
Yes.
So there's a connection there too. Like they gain experience with those same GFs that carries. You're learning the same abilities. It's like they're totally shared between the times.
Now, there's a gameplay reason for that, but the story equivalent, I think that's fascinating. Actually, I didn't look into that as much as you did just now, so that's actually really cool.
Yeah. Oh, and so you go on the patrol with Kiros, right? You're running around, but and sort of just killing monsters. I think he ends up tracking it too. You go back and report to Rain. I killed 17 monsters.
Well, and it's funny because he says that we have to go back and report to the assistant commander.
Yeah,
and Kiros is like, "Who's the assistant commander?" He's like, "You mean that girl at the bar?" He's like, "Yeah, well, she's the commander. The assistant's Ellone." So he's got to report to this little girl. Yeah. Like, at least that's what I don't know if I misread it or not, but it's just so funny that he she's the assistant commander, she's a 4-year-old girl. He includes her on all this, Like, that's a thing. Like, to be able to have, like, the trust of a child, basically, he treats this child like a child in many ways, but also just like a friend.
Yeah.
And that's, like, another part of their special connection.
Yeah.
But, yeah, that's funny how he can always go back and do that. But you also find some people in in Squall's world in the future who will tell you all the stats and stuff, and how many monsters you killed and whatnot.
But you get back to the town, and before you report, there's some Galbadian soldiers there in the square, kind of like in the main little square of Windhill, which is the name of the town, I think.
Yeah.
And you talk to them, and they are all talking about the Sorceress War that we have learned if you're looking at some of the notes in the
Edea,
menu,
right?
Was Sorceress Edea.
Yeah.
And they're talking about Sorceress Edea and this war with Esthar as if it's currently happening. They're currently fighting it, right? Yeah. And Edea is this sorceress that they all fear in Galbadia, and she's the ruler of Esthar. Another pretty obvious suggestion that you are back in time, like, because as we've read in these tutorial menus and at the computer terminal, that happened 17 years ago, that Sorceress War. And they're talking about Edea and how she's looking for a successor, right? They're looking for a successor to Sorceress Edea. Yeah. And there's even one soldier there who mentions that Galbadia will kidnap little girls. So these are all little pieces or hints that are left behind, but what we know in the future is that Edea is the sorceress. It's not Edea. And that somehow there's a successor, there's a passing on of this role of sorceress to someone else, and that they're kidnapping girls to try to find a compatible successor to pass this power on to.
So it's almost like, now let me get this straight, Galbadia doesn't have a sorceress, they're getting their butts kicked by Esthar because Esthar is just way advanced.
Yeah.
They feel like the only way they can battle is by getting their own sorceress.
Yes.
They got it. and she killed their president. Now she runs their country.
Exactly.
But it's almost like a nuclear war. You know, it's like you need nuclear weapons to be able to compete. But once you get them, you have like you have turned yourself into an evil empire capable of destroying the world. And like maybe you shouldn't look for that.
Yeah, and this was all bred from a fear because Esthar went dark. They basically just shut themselves off, and
they
no one
say
knew what they were doing.
because Esthar was basically like an entire continent, right?
Yeah.
A huge continent, and they're saying there is nothing. This is hinted at in this disc. There is nothing on that continent that they can see. It is just
empty
forests
wilderness.
and mountains. It's nothing. Yeah.
And nobody has any idea what's going on there.
Yeah.
All they know is that used to be the most advanced civilization in the world, headed by an evil sorceress.
Right.
And we know they're not just sitting there doing nothing. So, you know, President Delling and others, I think even Martine, who was the head of the Galbadian Garden.
Yeah.
He mentions this a little bit when you get to Fisherman's Horizons later when you talk to him, that, you know, I think it's him. I think he's the NPC that tells you about this, but I might be misremembering it. But somebody is, or no, it's Calloway. It's
the mayor.
No, the general who is Caraway, Rinoa's father.
Sorry. Oh yes.
So if you go back to Delling City after the prison escape sequence, which we'll get into in a minute, you can drive back over to Delling City. I did that for some triple triad with General Caraway because he has Rinoa's card.
Oh, sick.
So I went there to play him, but you can talk to him, and he is the one who talks about basically has these regrets about like Galbadia pursuing this goal of getting their own sorceress to try to combat Esthar.
Well, he doesn't even know the extent of his regrets on something like that, as we will see in the future. But
exactly, yes.
That's funny.
So anyways, essentially in all these 17 years that Esthar has gone quiet, Galbadia invaded Timber, has tried to like expand their power, essentially, and to get their own sorceress just to be ready to fight Esthar again.
Right.
It specifically mentions when you're on the train for the president kidnapping little mission with the Timber Owls. They have like a, what do you call it, a little like whiteboard in the background with some clippings from magazines.
Oh, yeah.
And you go read that, and it talks about how Delling essentially invaded Timber after coming into office when the Sorceress War ended, and tried to like expand his power as much as possible. And all of this, and then eventually he brought a sorceress on and was going to do the whole purpose of this was to be able to get ready, prepare to fight Esthar again.
Right.
And so anyways, all of this is basically leading back into the fact that when you're in Laguna's time, they're talking about Sorceress Adele as if she's currently in power, and Esthar as if they're currently fighting them. So it's made pretty clear at this point, we're in the past. Laguna, all this stuff happening is really long time ago. What's going on here?
Well, and one thing that solidifies that, at least for my playthrough, was what Kyros kind of convinces Laguna to do. He says, hey, you've always wanted to be a journalist, right?
Yeah.
Like, there's this, what's it, Timber
Maniacs.
Timber Maniacs is, like, what's the word? They're getting freelance articles, and they basically publish almost everything they get because they're looking for so much stuff.
Yeah.
And so Laguna's like, oh, sick. So I could just like write whatever, take pictures, and then they'll publish it. And Kyros is like, yeah, you can do whatever you always wanted to do. Apparently he's always wanted to be some sort of traveling journalist. Yeah. And so he convinces him to go, and you later on, you do find issues of Timber Maniac, old issues, like very old, with Laguna in them.
Yep. And you read them,
you start seeing, and they're all like.
It's in Selfie's diary at the computer terminal, right?
That's where I saw it. Yeah.
Yeah, you could read like all these different issues, and it's just his travels across the world as a journalist or whatever.
And some of those pictures are so bad, but they do it on purpose because it's like one of them, he's in Esthar, and he's like, oh, look at this, and it's like, what is that? But you can't really tell with the picture, but it's like some weird looking.
They're hinting that something weird is in Esthar.
Yeah, something weird's there, and Laguna went there.
Yeah.
And he wrote an article, but it's very like shrouded in mystery. Like he doesn't say what it is or where it is. He just says, "Hey, I went here. It was super cool. It was awesome. Thumbs up." Right.
Yeah.
And Selfie's kind of thinking to herself, like, "Wow, you know, this if they can do whatever he's talking about, it must be a pretty high tech place." But this was so long ago that as far as we know,
who knows if
Esthar doesn't
it's
even exist
still
anymore.
like that.
Yeah, it wouldn't even be like that anymore.
Exactly. Yeah, that was a good thing to bring up the Timber Maniacs issues regarding
because I think that's basically where we end there. And you don't see him leave, although he does walk in while Rain is talking to Ellone. And Rain is, Ellone is like, hey, can't you just marry Laguna and let's just like chill and be here forever? And Rain is like, yeah, no, I like him too, but like he's got, other ideas.
Ambitions, aspirations for life.
There's other things he wants to do.
I don't think he can just settle down in a quiet
I don't want to
place.
tie him here, forever. And so, and I think that's more or less the end of it there, and then you find out through Selphie's diaries that he did. He went out and went to be a journalist and travel the world.
He didn't stay there in that town and marry Rain and just be like a foster father
bartender
to
forever.
Ellone or whatever.
Yeah.
He didn't stay there. So he's kind of left a mystery of what happened to him after that. So once we come out of that, I'm going to start calling them flashbacks because that's more or less what they are.
Not
it's
a dream.
kind of a.
Sure.
It's not really a dream. It's kind of a dream, but it's more like just a flashback to the past.
Yeah.
We come to the D District prison in Galbadia, where our characters are currently held hostage
after attempting to assassinate.
As they're prisoners.
Prisoners, yeah.
This is where the story of Final Fantasy VIII, and here's the thing, like, I can't decide whether to be like super critical of this prison escape sequence because it was intentionally really goofy, or whether it was because prison escape sequences almost always suck as a general rule.
Fair enough.
Escaping from prison is like one of the hardest things to do.
You got to plan it a long time, and you basically end up having to like try and fit in a place where your body shouldn't fit.
Yeah.
And that's how most people end up escaping. You don't just fight all the guards.
And to conceal what you're doing for years from the prison guards.
Yes, while you prepare
to know exactly how the security works there.
Yeah.
It takes incredible observation and intelligence and years of planning.
Right.
To make and to sort of like put that into your story, unless your whole story is like what was that show about? I think it's called Prison Escape or something like that.
Oh, Prison Break.
Prison Break.
With the actor, yeah.
So unless your whole show is about that,
he tattooed the whole map of the prison on his back. Like the entire map was tattooed on his back. Like he went through serious preparation for that.
Exactly, right? So like unless your whole show is based on that, the prison escape sequence is a minor plot.
You just need to get over
that you need to get through quickly. And so what tends to happen is that it's very unconvincing the way that prison escape sequences go. If you look back to like GoldenEye 64, this isn't even in the movie, right? Because in the movie, in that silo, that Russian silo, Bond never even goes there. In the movie, it's just blown up and Natalia is the only survivor or whatever. But in the game, they have a whole mission inside of that silo where I think you're in prison and you use that watch to like laser the lock and get out or whatever.
Start killing everyone.
Right, like they're usually done like that.
Yes.
But this might be the worst one I've ever seen in anything in my whole life.
Because it was so like, hey, I have an idea, let's do it. And it was just like split second. Like, hey, you go stand in the corner and when he comes in, you'll bash him on the head. Like they've never thought of that before.
It's like, it goes back to what we were talking about last time, where it's like a kid thought up that prison escape.
That's exactly.
Because when we did similar sequences of prison escapes in our movies and stuff.
Totally did
and they were always like that. It was always like, oh, please, Mr. Guard, I'm feeling sick. Can you come help me? And then, boop, now I have the keys and I escape.
And the guard comes in alone. Like, at first, with the prison escape, seriously, it's so funny. With the prison escape, you got the 3 guards, and it's just so stereotypical. They're all just kicking him. You guys suck.
I love that his
Zell
name.
Just keeps getting
I love that the name of the warden is Mean Guy.
Yes,
his
guy.
name is Mean Guy, and they're like, "Oh, you're so mean."
And selfies.
That is not the word I would use to describe an abusive like prison warden.
Absolutely mean.
Mean?
Mean
How
is
about
like
cruel? How about abusive? How about like mean? He's just a mean guy.
Mean is like your older brother.
Yeah.
Right? Like, but we're talking a different level here. I mean, look what they're doing to Squall while this is all
torturing
happening.
him.
Squall is literally being tortured, and I thought that was fascinating that he was kind of hung up on a cross,
there's a lot to get through in that scene.
Yeah, but that's coming. That'll be what we talk about next. But with this prison break, so they come in with 3 guards. Okay, good job, like 3 of you at least, right? But these are trained fighters, and they're not tied up or anything. They just are let walk around in the prison cell. And then why in the world did that Moomba get in there and then just like stay there?
Yeah, so, okay.
He just showed up, and then they were like, you want to come too? Let's
go. The 3 of them come, and they kick him and beat him up, and then they leave. And then I think it's that Moomba's bringing him it's like he's got like a tray.
Their food, yeah.
He's bringing them
their
some
lunch.
food or something. He trips and falls.
But after he trips and falls, he just stays there.
Yeah, the Moon just stays in the room.
He just stays there.
And then
in the end, it's like, oh, you want to come too? Let's all go.
We've got Zell,
Yeah.
Quistis, Rinoa, and Selphie all in the same jail cell thing, whatever, the block or the room, whatever it is. And then they're trying to talk about what they need to do next, how they're going to get out of this situation, whatever. Right. And they confirm that Zell was actually watching a dream sequence or a flashback of Ward, who was not with Kiros or Laguna in the scene we just watched.
And where was he?
He was
we
working
don't see it, but
as a janitor in this prison.
In that prison, right.
So Zell...
So Zell thinks for a second.
He's like, I've seen this.
I know where everything is.
Where we are, and I know the layout of this prison. So I know how to get out of this place.
Yeah.
Is essentially like the plot contrivance.
Even though he's not really the one that's leading the escape. I mean, other than just the initial, let's bash the guard on the head and then leave. I guess he goes and finds the weapons, right? So he goes and gets all the weapons.
So he has some level of familiarity with the place and can...
Oh, you know what he does know about, though, is how to control that weird elevator thing going up and down.
Yes.
He stays back.
Like the machine.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's kind of to explain how he's able to do all that, right?
Right.
But the actual escape from the cell itself.
Yeah, that's hilarious.
He calls to the guard.
One guard
and
walks
says, hey, I think she was bitten by a snake. And the guard's like, wait, what? And he comes in the room and he just punches him in the gut. And it's over.
Takes the key card. Yeah, it's over. Done. One punch.
It's got to be. Yeah. I mean, if not number one, top 2 or 3 lamest, dumbest prison escapes ever conceived. It's so stupid.
Yes. It would have been better if they were able to get the Moombas. I know they can eventually, something like this happens, but if they were able to convince the Moombas to help out while they were still in the cell instead of at
the
some other
Moombas
point.
help Squall escape.
Yes, later, yes.
And that felt totally right because they think he looks like Laguna. Another hint of something to come.
Yes.
They all are calling him Laguna.
Right. But
convincing a prison guard that someone in this highly
by a snake.
what would you call it, sterile facility.
Yeah.
That a snake got in here and bit one of the prisoners.
Yes.
And he just walks in and lets
just
himself get punches,
one punch,
and it's over. Really, really dumb. But whatever.
Okay. So he does it. They escape from jail. It's their big escape. And then they're like, oh, we need to go find our weapons. Well, whoop-de-doo. You go up one level, and there's 2 guards just playing with your weapons. Oh, here's some cool nunchucks. Oh, these are cool. This is fun. Zell just walks up, beats them up, grabs the weapons, brings them back down, right? Mm-hmm. But this is the time when he brings them back down. It's when Biggs and Wedge, right, show up, and they're bad guys in this particular game. And they walk in, and they're like, all right, guys, we're going to teach you a lesson. And it just so happens, this is the weirdest thing ever. When they each get their weapons, they grow big,
like a Power
giants.
Ranger feature.
And then they do their little cha-cha-cha, and then they shrink back down. Now,
this is the reason why I'm not sure I'm meant to take any of this seriously.
That's fair enough.
It's supposed to just be a total joke sequence.
Yeah.
And that might be the case, that maybe that was the intention. But it's just a weird thing to do.
Yeah.
I feel like throughout the game, that balance between knowing when I should take the game seriously and when I shouldn't is pretty straightforward. It's pretty well defined, right? And they do a good job of making that obvious and making it sort of work. This is probably the one place in the game where I feel like I don't get it.
I agree with that, and it probably does have a little more to do with what's happening in between, because in between us seeing them in prison, you've got Squall getting tortured, right?
Yeah.
And Squall, he's really not he's handling it in the sense that he's not divulging information, but he doesn't really know what they're asking him for in the first place.
Yeah.
Because Seifer is here. Seifer's in this facility, and he wants to know what the real purpose of Seed is. Mm. And Squall's like, you were part of Seed. Oh, torture some more, so he'll get shocked, and then they'll ask him, what's the point of Seed? My initial thinking was Seifer's lost his memories. Mm. That's not necessarily what happened. What happened is that he feels like there's a deeper meaning to Seed.
Yeah, once you actually get in.
Yes, that the younger trainees, like he was, the students don't know about.
Yeah.
But Squall's initiation, what was it? It was like 2 minutes long. It was just like, here's some nice words, and here's your robe, and now go.
Yeah, go on your first mission.
Go dance, and
there was nothing to it.
Have a mission. There was nothing, and so, but Seifer just won't buy that, right? So that's why Squall's being tortured, and that's probably why Squall's even still alive.
Yeah,
because Edea wants to know if there was more about Seed than just we're mercenaries that go around and fight around the world, right?
Right.
So he's being tortured, and in between him being tortured, the guys, the prisoners, Zell and Selphie, they're in the cell and they can hear him. They're like, we can hear screaming, right? Like, what is that? What's going on? Somebody's screaming. Well, then they're just being silly. And the way Squall's being tortured,
that's a good point.
He's hung up basically on a cross, being electrocuted.
Yeah.
In a weird way, and he basically talking to himself, but he basically is like, he tells Seifer his breath stinks, I think. And he's we're done. He's just accepting his fate. He's gonna die.
Yeah.
And he kind of hangs his head down, and then we go to this stupid prison escape sequence. The contrast is, I think, what makes it so much less palatable.
It seems like the wrong time, especially in light of the fact that Squall's being tortured. And I had actually forgotten that they were aware of this somehow.
Yeah, they had heard.
That makes it, that actually clarifies how I feel about it. I'm glad you brought that up, because this is, in my opinion, not really the time to go that like extremely goofy route with it.
Yeah.
Because it's not consistent with like the stakes of the scene.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, it's just they kind of turned that into a joke. And it's not very clever. Now, like I said, most prison escape sequences are pretty lame like this.
Unless it's the whole, like you mentioned, unless the whole story is about the escape.
Yeah, but like contrast this, let's say, to like the equivalent scene in Final Fantasy VII, which is the public execution they're going to do on TV after Meteor's been summoned. And so they have like Tifa locked in that gas chamber. I mean, it relies on a similar kind of like cliche plot contrivance for the guard to accidentally drop the key as he's leaving the room, so that Tifa can like reach with her feet. But at least she's confined here, and it's like still a high
and it
stakes.
Wasn't her idea.
It's a high stakes scene.
The opportunity presented itself
because it's
to
like,
her.
if I don't hurry
and
grab this key, like and put it into my mouth and like unlock this, like I'm gonna die, right? So there's some level of like high stakes to that. But in addition to that, Barrett is trying to like get in there and can't help her out. But like the party has sort of planted Kate Sith as like a fake journalist into the scene to like subdue Scarlet, and so there's at least a plan that has some level of thought applied to rescuing them, right?
As opposed to just a first thing you think.
Is it the best prison escape sequence ever? No, but it's at least convincing enough to not make me think too hard about it. In comparison to this,
there were multiple steps, right? This one, there was one step, and it worked.
Hey, dumb guard, come in here and just let me punch you. Mean guy, let me come punch you and take your key and leave. It's I don't know. I just really didn't like that. I agree. I really didn't like that. But the rest of the sequence is pretty good, especially all the stuff with Seifer and Squall.
That's fascinating.
And I think the way, in particular, it's beginning to clarify like Seifer's motivations, right?
Yeah.
His romantic dream he keeps talking about. This, I can't remember the exact words he said. I think I wrote them down. But it gives a little bit more context to like where he came up. And we're going to talk a lot more about this, I think, in the next episode, where he came up with this idea. So he basically says that his childhood dream was to become a sorceress's knight. And he says, this is the scene. So he's talking about almost like it's a movie. This is the scene
that's right.
where you swear your undying hatred for me. The tale of the evil mercenary versus the sorceress's knight.
Right.
So we see this naive, almost childlike
fantasy.
Total fantasy or dismissal of like reality, of what's really happening, to embody this, I guess, just dream he's always had. So he's already beginning to justify what he's doing by claiming that Squall is an evil mercenary. I'm like the holy sorceress's knight, and this is the scene in the movie where you swear your undying hatred. He's trying to play out.
It's a movie to him.
It's a total fantasy world he's living in now.
That's kind of
completely separated himself from reality.
Star Wars Episode 3, where Anakin's like, from my point of view, the Jedi are evil, you know? Seifer's like, hey, it's all relative, man, but I'm the Sorceress's knight. So, like, I got the long end of the stick or whatever.
So his ego, which was already a problem, has gone off the rails, and it's. I found it at least convincing.
Oh, me too.
That he's gone to this level where he's willing to torture Squall, right? Even though he has shown these qualities of being like a better person at heart, it's like his whole life has basically been, he's felt like a failure.
Right.
He's kind of been belligerent in his like, I'm going to stay this rebel kind of person in this, you know, like bad boy without a cause. But like continual failures, and now being presented this absolutely just perfect opportunity to realize his childhood dream. And his ego has taken that and just run with it completely, to the point where he's now justifying torture of his like fellow classmate, right? And so like,
fascinating.
I kind of see this as being like, I almost don't see Seifer as being evil in it. He's just so broken psychologically and emotionally. And he's so young and ignorant and naive, and has essentially been manipulated and taken advantage of by the Sorceress. And it's just really unfortunate that he never has had the humility to like see through what is happening to him.
All right, so there's kind of a lot that I need to add to these thoughts about Seifer now that I have finished the game and had more time to think about how the character was handled, and perhaps even some of the implications as to just how much magic was involved in the manipulation of his mind by Edea. That changes some of my thoughts now from the time that I recorded this podcast. So within this scene where Seifer is torturing Squall, we see here that Seifer is not only fully aware that this is going to happen, but that he is complicit in this, right? He's complicit in the missile launch on Balamb Garden. This, of course, is a truly evil act, and there's even something he does right at the end of the game, which I will touch on in a future episode, that made it very hard for me to feel sympathetic toward the character. But we have to try to consider here how much of what's happening is magical manipulation by the Sorceress and how much of it is him acting as a free agent. And this is where I don't know the exact answer. We can really only look at a couple of clues to help us understand just how much Seifer is being quote-unquote mind-controlled by the Sorceress. In the Timber TV station, when Seifer has taken the president of Galbadia hostage, he backs him up into a room. And inside of this room, you can see that there's kind of a purple mist that creates sort of a vignette around the screen here. And Edea shows up and talks to him and essentially offers him the opportunity to become her knight, which he accepts because what else is he going to do? Also, that's been his childhood dream, is to be a sorceress's knight. Certainly, Balamb Garden is going to do nothing to help him out of this situation. He basically has no choice. But in addition to this, when Seifer and the sorceress leave, this purple mist disappears from the room. This seems to me to be evidence, and I see it as pretty strong evidence, but I don't know how other people feel, that the sorceress had some kind of magic cast there that was muddling with his mind a little bit. So at least from the beginning here, it seems to me that there is some kind of magical manipulation that's happening, which would take the onus of responsibility off of Seifer to some degree. How much it is, it's impossible to say because we don't know exactly how this magic works. Now, that being said, how long does that continue? Later on in the game, Edea will not be actively exercising that same type of magical control over him. We'll know that for sure. So is there a point in the story where he's no longer acting at sort of the whim of the sorceress, but where he is making his own choices again? It's hard for me to know that for certain. And it'll be interesting to see what other people think about that. But at this point, right here, when he is complicit in the missile launch on Balamb Garden, Balamb Garden essentially left him out to dry when this whole thing happened at the Timber TV station with the president of Galbadia. Garden wasn't going to do anything to help him. So I could see that from his perspective now, especially with any kind of brainwashing that's going on with the sorceress, that he could see the missile launch on Balamb Garden being a necessary act, even though he does express, at least a little bit here, that it's unfortunate that it has to be done. However, late in the game, and I'll probably retouch on this in the 5th episode of the podcast, it's hard for me to sort of... I'll just put it this way. I don't like the way Seifer is handled in the latter part of the story. I think Seifer was really great in the first disc. And here, even in this scene, in the opening scene of disc 2. But after this, it's hard for me to feel sympathetic toward that character. And we'll see why when we get to it. I just wanted to add this point in addendum because it is kind of messed up that Seifer is on board, seemingly, with this missile launch on Balamb Garden. It's not something that I talked about in the podcast or brought up as a point. And I think it is something to be considered when trying to decide, whether he should be, or whether we as the audience should be sympathetic to him. But again, it's hard to parse how much of a free agent he is at this moment. How much of the manipulation and brainwashing is of a magical nature, or how much of it is just him buying into it for the sake of living out his childhood dream. It's difficult to say.
How he's being taken advantage
of.
And
so there's kind of an interesting villain that they're building in him here. Mm-hmm. I never have really felt like he's an evil person, but yet I'm still convinced he's willing to go to this kind of cruel length to achieve his ends.
For his own.
Yeah.
Yeah, his own point of view. And you're not even speculating because later on in this disc, we do see his, we see more, we do learn basically those exact things about Seifer, about how inadequate he really does feel.
Yeah.
And how, I don't know, how the sorceress kind of
used
is using him.
Used that.
Completely.
Totally used that.
Yeah, completely.
Not really much else to talk about with the rest of the escape. Like you said, the Moombas come in to rescue Squall. They call him Laguna. They're all like calling him Laguna. And he's like, hey, you know Laguna too? Like, what's going on here? The Moombas all know Laguna. They're calling Squall Laguna. And again, kind of an important foreshadowing or hint to something later. Keep that in mind as you're playing. But I did write down that the FMVs in this game they just continually outdo themselves. Like they just
really
get better and better and better.
They do.
And the way that they make them interactive too, you're playing while the FMV is
They did a lot of
happening.
that in Disc 2.
Yeah. It's amazing to me that all of the content of Disc 2 fits on one disc.
I know,
it's insane, considering the FMVs too. But so
you're
they finally
when they escape and there's the dust storm.
Yeah, and it's digging. The prison is digging into the earth. And Squall is like shimmying across the bridge, right? And he's trying to get to the other edge.
And you see the dust swirling, getting
and
closer.
It's just closer and closer. Yeah. It's so cinematic.
Yeah.
And I don't know, it's just super cool. Like they started this technique, like we said in FF7. And I'm playing FF7 with Chrissy right now, and I'm kind of like comparing the FMV, interactive FMVs.
Oh, yeah.
And they're cool in FF7.
Yeah.
They're cool. But they're like beyond cool in FF8. They're just like way off the charts awesome and just really exciting.
Yeah.
And just really well executed. They blend together really well. Of course, they probably blend better on the original PS1 on a CRT TV than they would on an HD version.
Yeah, I was saying, now I am playing it in standard def, but not on a CRTV, so I guess that's...
But yeah, it's probably, they probably blend, the backgrounds blend with the characters better.
Better.
than they would in the
Guaranteed,
HD
absolutely
versions.
better because you got that sharp outline in the HD version.
But nonetheless, they are super, super, super cool. And it just seems like every time
later on.
It's like every time that another one comes up, it just seems like it's even more exciting and more cool and more cinematic than the last.
Yeah.
So they just did super good job on those in this game.
So once you cross that bridge, I thought that it was like, oh my gosh, they wanted to get out of the prison, right? They went to the bottom. Oh no, it's just full of dirt. There's nothing here. What's going on?
Yeah.
They go to the top. They realize that they're on this big, tall drill thing. Then they have to crawl. You climb across the bridge and get all the way to the end. And I thought you were then going to have to go all the way back down in order to get out. But they just kind of skipped that part.
Yeah.
They're just like, okay, we're down.
That
and we're in the
dungeon
cars.
is already really tedious. You have to go up and down and up
they
and down.
look the same.
Oh
Every
my gosh.
level looks the same. We talked about reusing assets in our last episode. That's nothing compared to the prison escape sequence. They have to tell you what level you're on because everything looks the same each time.
What really bothers me about it is that there is like a gate because the stairs going from one level to the next are right next to each other.
Yeah.
And on floor 7 where you start, there's no gate there. So you can just go up the stairs or down the stairs. Whoop,
Right.
whoop.
But
and
then you
every
have
other
to
level,
go
there's a gate that
around.
forces you
Yes.
to walk all the
And
way
you can't
around.
jump the gate. You gotta go around. That's annoying. And also,
It's
why
really
are there? What are there?
annoying.
10 or 12 levels, something like that.
Yeah, it's 12.
12. And they know that it's too much because
Yes.
you can talk to the Moogles and set shortcuts.
Yes.
To floor 9 or 5 or 2 or whatever.
There are some treasures and some guys you can play triple triad with.
Yes. And
stuff.
I did. I ran across a good card, and that's when I was like, I'm going to start playing this game.
Yeah. But like, this is optional content.
Yes, it's optional.
So why not make it optional by taking the damn rail away so that I can just go up the stairs
You don't
quickly?
have to
So
go
I don't
around.
have to run. Maybe it's because
a
they
third
want
the
you
way
to
around-
fight more monsters.
well, that's
Maybe
it.
it's a balance issue.
Yeah.
But I don't know why it has to be a balance issue because the monsters are always scaled to your level. So
Yes,
it can't
that's
be
true.
that. So maybe they just want you to spend more time fighting so you get more AP to learn more ability. But you can just grind for those
If
at
you
any
want
time
to.
you want.
I don't know the games back in the day, the JRPGs, they don't like grinding as a thing that you do separate from the original story. I think they
Yeah.
tried to incorporate it in, like
Build it into the
So
sequence.
let's have maybe it was originally 5 levels, and they're like, let's make it 12 so that people have to fight more enemies, so that they should be this level by the time they get out. And as opposed to, now they have to leave town and go walk in circles grinding for a while and come back, then they'll be the right level. So I guess they kind of tried to build it into, but this game with the scaling level system, it doesn't really make sense to do that as much. They kind of got rid of level grinding for the most part.
If you have the Diablos GF at this point, which is again not one that's like it's not necessarily in your way. I think you get an item from Sid before leaving Balamb to go on the Timber Owls mission. He gives you like a magic lamp, and then you like take that to a save point, you examine it, and then you end up fighting Diablos.
Yes,
if you
and then
have,
you get the summon,
it's kind of an out of the way thing.
That's right.
But if you have Diablos, and if you've been leveling up Diablos well, you can get the encounter none ability at this point.
Yes, that's where you're going.
So you can turn the battles off anyways. I don't know. I just don't know. All I know is that it's very annoying to run around the same loop like 12 times all the way up, and then now we got to go all the way back down, and then now we got to go all the way back up again, and then and so they end up just skipping that. So you're out, and then you drive those like those Jeep
RVs
things
or whatever,
or RVs, and then
we have a new crossroads.
and you see the missile silo base out there in the distance firing missiles from Galbadian.
Towards Trebia Garden.
Called Trebia Garden, which is where Selphie originally was
where
training.
she's from.
She transferred from Trebia to Balamb Garden.
Right.
So she comes from Trebia, and she's all worried about it. So this is where, like the mission itself, I don't think there's much to talk about with like
how they infiltrate and get the missiles.
a couple of like there are a couple of quirks to it that maybe we'll get into, but I think that what's more important about this sequence and everything moving forward from here is that we continually have people pressuring Squall into being a leader, into making decisions.
And he keeps thinking to himself, I didn't ask for this.
He is starting to resent the leadership role.
He doesn't like that.
He doesn't want people to depend on him.
Yeah.
He's very much an individualist in that aspect. Like everyone just care about yourselves, worry about yourselves.
They're telling him to split up the parties, saying, hey, who goes where and who does what? And he's like, you do what you want. Like
earlier in the game, he seemed at least open or to being a leader.
Because the stakes weren't as high. Selfie's hometown didn't just get destroyed.
Exactly.
And he needs to, like...
I think what he says...
It's a different situation.
Did I write down what he said? He said, what if something happens to the people that I pick to go in that group? He doesn't want the responsibility of their deaths on his hands.
If something goes wrong.
He's starting to really, really resent the burden of leadership. And it kind of starts right here the first time. But all throughout this disc, Sid, everyone at the garden, all of a sudden everyone's just like, Squall, you have to make the choice. You have to do it. You tell us what to do. And he's like,
I get that. I can identify with that.
I don't want this at all anymore. I do not want it. Why me?
Yeah. And there's a part later on in the disc where I think it's Rinoa is saying, hey, just so you know, everyone likes you. Yeah. Everybody likes you, and they look up to you. And even you know, us, the player playing the game, doesn't really get that so much because Squall feels like such a loner. And as you're playing the game, that's just kind of how he is, right? Yeah. And people know you, but nobody's like going out of their way to talk to you, but you don't know why. You don't feel like you're this hotshot, other than you make it to seed, and everyone wants that, so they clap, and that's cool. But you find out later through Rinoa that everyone really does look up to him for whatever reason. You don't even really know why. He sure as heck doesn't know why. Yeah. But everyone really likes him and looks up to him and sees him as a leader, whether he likes it or not, and they kind of always have. And I feel like he's been oblivious to that.
Yeah.
I feel like he just hasn't known that because he hangs out by himself.
Yeah.
And he doesn't get to know people. He doesn't talk to people. He doesn't find out what people think of him.
Yeah.
And he's finding out now that everyone thinks that he's got the stuff to be the leader. And now he's finding this out, and he really still just wants to be alone.
Yeah. And this is all deeply psychological, like his reasons for this, right? It's based in trauma. It's based in his past, and we'll get into that.
We do see some of that in flashbacks
later on, but like it's more than just a not wanting the burden. I mean, that's in and of itself a reason not to want leadership. But there's a deeper emotional, psychological reason for him to resist this.
Yes.
And to want to just worry only about himself. And all throughout this disc, that the layers on that reason begin to be peeled off in his interactions with the party as they try to like loosen him up.
Yeah.
Any means necessary, just get him to like freaking take a step back and take a breath and just calm down and just open up a little bit.
He does one or two times in this disc. He does have his little outbursts.
Yeah.
You know, he kind of freaks out for a little bit. But that happens when you do what he does and keep everything inside.
So they split up into two parties. One is going to go back to warn Balamb of these missiles that are coming. The other is going to try to stop it or affect the missile launch to some degree to try and save Balamb. So they split up, and Squall goes with this party. Selfie kind of leads this party and goes this way, I think. I think Selfie has to go to
I think I didn't try this, but I feel like I've tried it in the past where you try to put her in your party and she objects and you have to redo it again.
So Selfie has to go this way, Squall has to go this way.
I don't know if that's exactly the case, but I believe that's what happens.
That's what I remember, but I might be wrong. I just always put Selfie in this group.
I know, ever since
but so it's a pretty funny little sequence. Now here, the goofiness of this infiltration works.
I think it works. I think it works very well. I like it.
Yeah, I like it. It's funny. Like the dialogue is really funny. The one thing about it that is really weird or that stands out to me is that you finally get into like the computer system to like affect the launch, and they have built into the software like
an error rate.
You've
do you want to miss your target? Yes. How badly do you want to miss?
I want to increase the chance of error in the accuracy of my missile launch. What the fetch?
I love that. And as I was raising the error rate, I was like, what
is this? This is so weird.
So there were a couple of people who, in the comments, were kind of trying to defend this error ratio thing, who said that the error ratio might be likened to something like a spread. So rather than all the missiles hitting like a pinpoint spot, when you turn up the error ratio, it spreads out where the missiles land so that you do a wider range of damage to, like a larger area. That's the concept behind it. So I did a little bit of research on this, just trying to find if that term, error ratio, is used in any real missile guidance systems. And I mean, I haven't had time to do like anything extensive on this end, but I've looked into it a little bit. And I can't seem to find anywhere that is a term that is used for missile guidance. I mean, I've been looking here at inertial guidance systems and astro-inertial guidance systems and celestial navigation and all these different terms, whether you're launching from a silo that's on land, right? So it's like an intercontinental ballistic missile where it doesn't have to, the guidance system doesn't have to account for a moving platform upon which it's launching, right? Versus if you're launching from like a submarine that is moving at the time. I've looked into a lot of things to the point where I'm researching terms like circular error probable and like all kinds of stuff. And there's nothing here that says anything about an error ratio. So the term error ratio still feels pretty silly to me. I don't know why they went with that term instead of maybe something more like the spread, or I don't know, anything else other than error ratio, because that to me signifies like, let me increase the chances that I miss my target. So I think that this is probably just a problem of using the right terminology more so than it is like a problem with the idea behind it, or maybe like the intention behind the idea, which probably is closer to what people are saying. You're just turning up like the range at which these missiles will land rather than like homing them all onto one like singular smaller point. I haven't really been able to find, and I'm not convinced that something called error ratio actually exists in real life missile guidance systems, and that this was just something I didn't know about or missed. I don't think so. It doesn't seem to be the case. But if there's anybody out there who knows more about this than me, feel free to hit me up in the comments.
Why not just say like I don't know, disconnect something inside of the missile, or change its coordinates,
like
send it into
GPS.
the ocean,
sure.
or something like that.
Something like that, to where it still gets launched, but it's not going exactly where.
So the only reason why this exists is because they want the missiles to actually reach Balamb for the scene where it then activates and moves out of the way, right? Yeah. They want that exciting sequence.
So you feel like you did something because the mission fails.
Just make it so it's too late. They get there, and like, okay, we're going to cancel launch. Oh, crap, it's too late. They've been launched already.
Well, you know what's funny?
Why make an error? Why build an error?
It doesn't feel like it matters. As you watch the missiles go, and it's like, oh, they're going to miss, though. Oh, they're going right towards it. Like, what the heck? The error rate didn't even matter.
Didn't matter at all.
Didn't matter at all. But what I think is funny is that this was pretty goofy, and they just got lucky in that they were able to pose as engineers and technicians and get into all the things, but it didn't work. All their goofiness basically didn't work because they didn't like verify that people were dead. And the people just the missiles get launched anyways. And that's a fitting result to the mission that they performed.
Yes.
It's like they go in,
the job that they did, the level of
havoc.
competence they had
for
the mission.
And the 2-second thought before, what are we going to do, planning, just non-existent planning. but they wreak havoc.
Yeah.
They just completely screw up the whole base, but the missiles still get launched.
Yes.
And they essentially fail. Not only that, they initiate a self-destruct sequence
Yeah.
and then get suckered into staying on the base, and it's locked and they can't leave.
I thought that was really funny because
it's fitting. It fits though. It makes sense that this stupid plan turned out like this.
Yes. We commented last week about the nature of some of these sequences feeling like they came from the mind of a teenage writer or something, right? In every spy movie we made, it didn't matter what the mission was. You had to plant a bomb to blow up the base. Like you had to blow up the base.
10 minutes, you got to get out.
And then you have to run out, and every base that a special agent infiltrates must also be destroyed before.
I think it's like GoldenEye 64 or something, where you got to put the mines on and leave.
I
think
every mission comes from that. Every mission, you got to blow up the base before you leave, and they can't get out in time. And that explosion was immense.
It was very large.
Nothing is surviving that.
At the time that we still saw them and the explosion simultaneously,
There's
they were
no
not in a
chance.
safe place.
I don't care even if they did get into that tank.
I know.
That tank is melted in an instant from that
Likely,
explosion.
very likely.
Nothing would survive
Or at
that.
least it'd be launched into space or something. It would be gone. Like you'd be knocking around inside of it, and you.
There's no surviving that explosion.
So,
It's
but
way too bad.
at the same time, there are a few elements of that infiltration mission that I thought were like kind of cool and pretty fun, right?
Yeah.
And so, and as you're sneaking around, like none of it's realistic, and it ends exactly how it should end. But I didn't feel like it was a waste of time the way I did it with other things. I felt like it was an interesting,
it was fun.
experiment, and we tried, it didn't work, and we'll see how this plays out.
Yeah.
But
It's a fun sequence. I definitely like it. It's that margin of error that was just threw me off a little bit.
Yeah,
and then
yeah.
Just totally.
And it didn't matter anyway.
There's just nothing that can convince me that they survived that explosion. It's just not possible.
Yes.
I don't care. This is Final Fantasy, and Cloud can survive falling from the top plate onto a bed of flowers.
That's right.
I don't even care about that being a common, acceptable thing in Final Fantasy. No one is surviving that explosion.
It was
There's no
right
way.
there. It was right in front of their faces as it was happening. It was right there.
Oh man.
Anyways, the missiles get launched, and it's really cool. You see them like winding through the clouds and going over the ocean and like approaching the garden.
Balamb.
And
And then when you get back with
when
Squall
Squall
and company,
gets there,
it's all in chaos.
Once
There's a
again.
whole like civil war happening inside the garden between the garden faculty and who they're referring to as
keepers.
the master, the garden master,
Yes.
versus the headmaster Sid and the students who follow him. They're all battling each other.
they're
And
battling. And
we don't
it's
know what's
like,
going on.
Find the headmaster, and the order is to kill him. If you see him, kill him.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of the students, or most of the students, are like, we're not doing that. But some students kind of.
Yeah.
So I don't know why they would, but for whatever reason, they side with
the garden master
the
and
garden
faculty.
keepers. Yeah.
And so they're all fighting. You're running around there. You're fighting people, trying to find where Sid is. You're going from room to room to room, trying to find him.
Yeah.
It's actually a pretty long sequence. It's a
quite
little too long in my
It
opinion.
is too long, yeah. Because you have to go to the right. You have to go to the infirmary, and
then you go to the library, and then you go to the
and you got to save the kids
explore
and the
and look around, and it's
and the cafeteria.
A lot of battles.
Each place you go, it's like, oh, we
He's not here.
We
Here's a-
grouped students here to make them think he'd be here. And
Yeah.
at one point, there's a hologram of Sid,
Yeah,
right?
it was like-
they're like, is that cool that we programmed this? Ha, he's not here.
So you just like wild goose chase
Yeah.
after wild goose chase, trying to find him. You get rewards, but it's just very long.
And where he is,
He's
just
in
made
his
me
own
cry.
office. He's just in his office the
I
whole
was
time.
laughing. I was like, oh my gosh, I forget. I played this game a year or two or 3 years ago, but I still forget this stuff. And how he's like, we made it seem like he was in hiding, but he was really just here the
He's
whole
just
time. I'm like,
hiding
oh
in
my
plain
gosh.
sight the whole time, right?
No one checked. Are you kidding me? This is ridiculous.
It's really silly.
Yeah.
But then he tells you about some sort of secret capability that the garden has that nobody
In
really
its
knows what it
basement, yeah.
does, right?
Yeah.
But this
And it's
key
really
will get
old.
you down there, go find out what's happening, and activate it or
And
figure
once
this
again,
out.
Squall's like, I don't know anything about this.
Yeah.
Why am I the one?
Why am I always the one?
And Sid's
Why
like
me?
limping. Okay, he can't do it himself, but still, Squall is like, why? I have no idea what this is. Why?
Yeah.
Why me?
Now, I do want to say that this will eventually be explained, particularly in Sid's case, why he's always appointing
Yes.
Squall
Yes.
to be a leader, why he's kind of pushing him in this direction. And like, because it's really weird when you think about it. Sid is the headmaster of the garden. And right after this sequence, he basically gives away all authority to Squall.
As the headmaster.
To a teenager.
Yes.
And he's just like, I defer to you from now on, bye-bye. I'm
Yeah.
no longer in control of anything. And it's just like,
And he's like, what do I do? And they're like,
Why?
whatever you want to do. Like,
he basically hands
Yeah.
the destiny of the garden
And-
into Squall's hands.
I get why from a gameplay standpoint, because you're the one controlling the ship and you're going around. You're
Yeah.
no longer, the story becomes a lot less linear at that point,
Yeah.
and you can kind of do whatever you want. And so they exemplify that by, or symbolize it, I guess. It symbolizes you, the player, gaining control by giving Squall control over the garden
itself to
because
move
the garden,
around.
But he goes down to the basement, and I thought this is where we find the garden's keeper, but it's not this point. It's you just go through this crazy maze where the detail is so good on these backgrounds.
Yeah.
But at the same time, it's hard for me to know where to go.
What you can interact with.
And part of Fisherman's Horizon were parts where I was like, where am I, first of all? Because you're always in a different part of the screen.
Yeah.
And where do I go from here? Because everything looks really detailed, and you feel like you can go anywhere. But as you start moving, you realize you can only go certain places.
Can't go on this or that.
Yeah. But that was part of it, in the basement of the garden. I was like, gosh, man,
now
where do I
I
go?
love the style that these PlayStation Final Fantasy games have, with the pre-rendered backgrounds and the fixed camera angles.
Yes.
I love that.
Me too.
I love that style. But the downside to it is that it is kind of hard to know what you can and cannot interact with.
Yeah.
And
Especially when things look so real.
Yeah,
and
I had
feel like you
always
should.
I had always assumed that Final Fantasy VII was the worst of the three examples.
Okay.
Because I've played it the most. There are a couple of screens that in particular I know of where even to this day I'm like,
The train
Just
graveyard was
please
one for me.
freaking walk onto that thing.
yeah.
And it's kind of just hard to get him to do what you want. And sometimes the directional pad is really screwed up where
Yes.
you're pressing up, but he's running like to the side
Up and
almost.
left, yeah, like diagonally.
And so like, and in between screens, on one screen they have you running straight, and it feels straight, and then you're running straight, but he just like runs down, and so it's like
Yeah.
you have to orient on almost every screen.
Every single screen you have to
to like
reorient.
reorient the directions.
Yeah.
So
and that's difficult, but yeah.
But in FF8, I feel like it's even worse.
Yeah.
And I'm saying this while simultaneously playing FF7 and FF8 at the same time.
Ah, really?
Like, and it really started to stick out to me in the same place. Like, I just don't know where I can run.
Yeah,
or,
where
or-
can you go?
And
The
so-
rules aren't for sure.
I say this only as a caveat to my continual pleading that some indie developer please make a game
Do
like this
this
someday.
like this again.
Right.
Even though it's weird, I love it. I really
This
do
is
like
the
it.
one downside to it.
This is the
that
downside,
There are
yeah.
some maps where it's hard
Yeah.
to know where you can walk and not, and what you can interact with,
Mm-hmm.
and where some ladder way in the background is what you can climb
Yes.
on, but it's hard to even tell that is a ladder.
But here's the thing, that's not the only ladder in the background. There's
Right,
three
there's
or
like
four
three-
others, and
which one is
that
the one?
one is the one.
yeah, and there's like a million ladders during the sequence. So
Yeah.
yeah, I totally agree.
But
with that.
eventually you get to this really old, like, you remember the movie Prometheus?
Yes.
When they get into that old ancient battleship
Yes.
that had crashed.
Yes.
That
Similar
is
feeling.
what it felt like, you know, and you get to these instruments and they do not look like modern computer instruments. Like,
Yeah.
it looks very, very different.
Yeah.
And Squall just kind of knocks things around. Eventually he gets a turbine, or what I call it a turbine, I don't know what
Whatever it is,
Some energy generator starts to
moving.
spin, and that starts this whole process. But
And the garden is mobile.
Yep.
It moves out of the
It
way.
flies.
The missiles miss, and you're able to
The
move
missiles
this thing
miss.
around. The
Do you
missiles
think-
miss.
They miss. Isn't that's funny?
Anyways, so that's good sequence overall. A little long in my opinion, but it is what it is.
Yeah, it was
but,
fun. I liked it though. I liked the insurrection at the Balamb Garden too, because I didn't think that was possible. Like, it didn't
Yeah.
make sense to me that was happening, and that the powers that be within Garden were turning against each other. Because
Yeah.
you don't even know until later on that there is a garden
master.
a garden master
Yeah.
who is kind of pulling the strings. You know some things, but you don't know the full extent.
Yeah.
And I actually thought it was really cool.
Yeah.
And it kind of exemplifies human nature a little bit. As much as I say, oh, who would side with the garden's master who they don't even know
Yeah.
over their headmaster who's like been with them for years and is like their teacher. But people become tribal, and especially we see this with Seifer and
Raijin and
Raijin and
Fujin.
Fujin.
Yeah.
How whatever side, if one person happens to go one side or the other, say they don't like the headmaster, people follow them, and factions and tribes start to develop, right?
Yeah.
And so it just kind of happens naturally. It's just a
Yeah.
natural thing that happens.
Totally.
There's a
Totally true.
power vacuum, and then people start to vie for power. It just happens.
And there are going to be some students
And I
that don't
actually
like
really liked
Sid,
it.
you know. like,
Exactly.
don't like the way he leads,
Yeah.
don't like
Or
his
maybe
personality,
Seifer
rubs them
didn't
the wrong way.
Seifer didn't get promoted to Seed, right?
Yeah.
And so whoever he had a lot of people that were around him, they may not feel the headmaster is qualified
Yeah,
anymore. You know?
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I think that's
I actually
true.
really liked it.
I also really liked the scene where we kind of blew over this a minute ago, but where Squall is essentially talking to Sid and like questioning why he's being chosen.
Yeah.
And Sid continues to try to prod him about like, well, what do you feel about this? Do you have reasons for feeling this way?
But he can't
And
express
in
his
his
feelings.
mind, he lists
Yeah.
probably like 12
Yes,
reasons.
a bunch, yeah.
So like we know
Yeah.
Squall feels
A lot.
pretty intensely and passionately about these things, right? He's starting to really, his emotions are beginning to boil.
Yeah.
And this is 100% true of introverted, aloof types.
Yes, of course, yes.
Where you have these strong feelings, but you keep them to yourself, and you keep them to yourself, and you don't express them, and you just let them continue to pile on each other over and over and over again to the point where you essentially just blow up.
Right.
And you can't contain it anymore.
Stress,
and you start taking that all out on somebody who doesn't deserve it, because they might be pushing your buttons a little bit, but it does not merit that kind of reaction.
But they don't know that it's been a year.
But this has been
exactly
a year of withholding all this inside of yourself, burying it, pushing it down. And they're actually doing a really good job in this game of showing that slow boil of Squall's emotions.
Because as you read his minds, he starts to list more and more things that he doesn't like or whatever.
Yeah.
And you start to read his thoughts more and more. His thoughts are interjecting in everything.
And he says, like, I don't know, a bunch of things in his mind about like why he, his problems.
But what is the word he says out loud?
What he says is, my feelings have nothing to do with it.
Yes, exactly. And I thought that was really good. That was really well done.
Absolutely
because you're reading, you don't know. Because at first I was like, we're listing a bunch of things, I'm going to pick one. I'm going to decide which one am I going to say. But it all comes down to nothing, because all he's willing to say is, my feelings don't matter. And that's clearly a lie. And he starts to realize that he's contradicting himself throughout this disc, especially towards the end. He's like, he realizes that he can't do it alone, but this is all part of it.
And he's becoming more and more internally, emotionally volatile. Like he's starting to outburst inwardly a lot more.
Yeah, more.
And that's going to lead to what we're not going to get into today, but the beginning of Disc 3.
Yeah.
A whole discussion about like why he decides to do what he does at that point.
Yeah. Which actually makes quite.
It's starting to make more sense to me when I'm paying attention to things like this. Like they really do lead up to this in a way that is convincing, in my opinion.
Yeah.
So
he's the new headmaster.
He's the new headmaster, basically.
But problem being, they don't know how to steer the ship, right?
I think they end up giving a title, and he thinks it's really silly that they're giving him a title. They're calling him a captain or a commander.
Yeah,
I think Quistis says, "You're the commander now." He's like, "Commander? Like what are you talking about?"
And they're like, "Just go with it."
Just listen, you're commander now. But Rinoa comes by, you wake up, she wants you to give her a tour of the garden.
Ah, yes.
And so you're doing that, you're going around showing her stuff. And it's really funny because she's clearly testing the waters here a little bit with Squall, trying to see, is there potential here?
Yes,
I kind of like you. She's trying really hard to flirt. She's trying really hard to get him to loosen up, to like, not be so closed off. And his his tour of this garden is very...
It's just dry.
And, this is this.
Stiff.
This is this.
Yeah.
Over there's the library. This is the cafeteria. And she's like, could you like make this more fun?
And he's like, what do you want from me?
What do you want me to do? You were the one who wanted me to give you this tour. Do you want me to or not?
Yeah,
like this is what it is. And she's like, fine. And like, you'll go in and like see a scene with Zell once again not being able to get hot dogs in time in the cafeteria. And he explains how hot dogs are, they're hard to come by in here. And anyways, in the course of doing this, this is kind of the first time. I mean, she's alluded to it. She said, you're the best looking guy here.
Yes, she likes him to some degree.
She wasn't necessarily coming on to Squall yet.
Right.
She was more a little bit torn about her feelings about Seifer. But like this is the first time where she's really starting to show some interest, particularly in Squall. Yes. And he is clueless, and he doesn't care.
Idea. He has no idea.
I think he does know. He does, at least later, you see a thought where he's like, it's really obvious that everyone's trying to get us together. So I think he knows it, but he's clueless as to what to do about it.
Right. He's clueless as to how he even feels about it.
Yeah.
He's like, this is what everyone else wants, this is what she wants. What do I want? Doesn't matter what I want.
Yeah.
That's like his thinking. It's like, doesn't matter what I want. I don't get attached to people.
And he seems to think that she's kind of an annoying person.
Yes, he does. But I like that they're actually building that up, because as you mentioned with Disc 3, the way that he thinks initially something is annoying is, maybe... there's different. You become endeared to somebody's annoying nature after a while. It's like at first you're like, oh, they're bugging me, but at some point it's like, man, I wish they'd bug me again.
There's that saying, familiarity breeds contempt, or isn't that what it is?
I don't know the specific one.
What is that saying? Anyways, the whole idea of it is that the longer you're in a marriage, soon like you start to like, like this person is. It's really annoying that these quirks about this person.
Yes.
But there's also kind of the opposite of that too, where a person, the more familiar you become with them, where initially you thought it was really annoying, you start to become endeared to those qualities.
Exactly.
And that can definitely be true for a lot of relationships.
And I think Squall, he's kind of dealing. He just doesn't know what to think of Rinoa. He can't take her seriously because ever since he met her in Timber, she's just not someone he can take seriously because of how she is. Right. She's spur of the moment. She's she's bubbly. She likes to have fun, and he just doesn't. He's not really sure about her.
Yeah.
But the next time she goes up to him, and the first time it's like, "Hey, give me a tour." The second time she's like, "Do you want to go for a walk?" And he's like, "I already gave you a tour." She's like, "I know, but I don't. I just want to go for a walk with you." She's trying harder to like not put any pressure on him. Even like give me a tour was apparently too much pressure for him to be able to just be natural and relax.
Yeah.
And so she's like, "Okay, now let's just walk. Like pressure's off. You don't even have to say a word to me. Like let's just go walk somewhere." And of course she's gonna try to talk to him, but he's just like, "Can't you walk yourself?" Like he's really not getting it, but it's intentional. He's trying not to get it.
Well, then here's another element that I think is important to keep in mind, especially as we come to what happens right at the beginning of Disc 3 for next time. A lot of the way that whoever is playing the game is going to understand Squall's feelings for Rinoa will actually depend on the options they select when they're given choices for what to say. Because there are lots of times where you can have a warmer response to Rinoa, or you can have a very cold response to Rinoa. And if you are always choosing the cold responses, it can be very stark when he starts to develop feelings for her. It can feel like it comes completely out of nowhere. However,
that's a danger of giving players choice.
Exactly. Yeah. If you had chosen the warmer responses, you might have seen some spark there is,
what's funny though, there is this one part, and I can't remember what it is, it's on disc 2. It's later. We're going to get to it later, but it's with Selfie, where Squall actually does attempt to offer her some kind of condolence for her situation. And immediately I don't think it was there yet. I think it was for her concert that she wants to put on.
Yeah.
And he goes and offers her some type of condolence, and she goes, "Whoa, Squall is actually like being nice and understanding towards me. I must really look depressed." And it makes her feel worse because he was like that to her, because she realizes how pitiful she's being because he's never.
Oh, is that where you can either choose to try to console or have
or have the shotgun guy
Irvine do it?
Irvine, yeah, it's that point.
So there's a lot of things.
But when you do that, even to the characters, even to Selfie, she's like, "That's not like you, Squall. Like that's a weird. You're being weird."
Well, and this is where, like, I do get the desire, because role-playing games had this divergence in Japan and in the West, where we give players lots of choice about who the character is, versus we're trying to tell a story here with an established set of characters with their own personalities, but we still want to have like elements of role-playing in it. So we want to give them choices, but I think it hurts the game specifically here in Squall's development and his arc and his relationship with the people around him. Because I'm serious. It's particularly evident in these particular scenes with Rinoa. These first initial, her trying to initiate something with him. Because if you choose the cold responses,
I tend to.
Because it feels in line with who he is.
With him. So if I was putting myself onto Squall, I'd choose the nice answers.
Yes.
But I'm trying to play as him, and it feels more natural to choose the
cold responses.
Yes.
And if you do that, if you choose the cold answers, I have not one clue what she could possibly ever see in him.
Okay, so this comment came actually in a personal message to me from one of our viewers, Heon, who lives and works in Japan, who wanted to add a little bit to like the cultural context behind this like coldness that Squall shows, and how that might be viewed in a romantic context in Japan versus here in the West. So I'm just going to read what he says. He says, as a side note on Rinoa and Squall's relationship, In Japan, there's a kind of cultural thing around girls basically suffering through standoffish and jerkish guys and molding their personalities to a guy's needs. It's difficult to explain, but basically a lot of girls in Japan expect that a guy they're into might be a total jerk and very standoffish, and that the process of getting him to like her involves jumping through a lot of hurdles by finding out what he likes and looks for in a girl and then shaping her personality to his needs. Many guys also expect this out of the girl. It's a very old school view of things, but it goes back to the man equals provider, woman equals housewife thing, where men woo women by demonstrating how dependable they are, and women woo men by putting on a real feminine and accommodating act. This is reflected in a lot of Japanese media as well, so while Squall's behavior toward Rinoa might look almost cruel in English and would drive most Western women away, a lot of Japanese women have more of a, well, this is the guy I want, so I'm going to do whatever I can to break through his defenses and make him love me kind of deal. But in Japan, the fetishism of romance generally means that even a lot of girls have a ludicrous amount of patience when it comes to getting the guy they want, so they'll take it. He goes on to say, obviously it's not like that all the time, but I've met enough Japanese girls who fit that pushy Rinoa mold to know she fits a type that probably reflects the Japanese creator's life experiences. In many ways, the Rinoa-Squall dynamic is very similar to the Cloud-Aerith dynamic from their first encounters, and the options provided also mirror each other. So I just wanted to add that in fairness, that this could be something that's lost in translation for me from the cultural divide between growing up where I've lived versus never really having any saturation in, Japanese culture. So just wanted to put that out there as well as a possible explanation for this.
She would be so turned off by him that she would be like, this guy's a freaking jerk.
Right.
I don't like him anymore. He's hot, but whatever. Like
he won't.
He's just really mean.
Right.
But if you choose the warm responses, it's a totally different situation. Because especially the second time when she comes back and she's like, hey, let's go for a walk. And she just tries to be cute about it. Your Majesty, Your Highness, like, could I please,
because he's the leader,
give this humble request to like accompany me. I chose the cold answer where he's like, this is stupid. And he goes back to the bed and he lays down. She says, okay, fine, I guess I'll see you later. And she walks away.
That would be the end of it.
That would be the end of that relationship from here on out, I would think. But if you choose to play along, it's a little bit, just even if it's just a sliver of his heart opening up, she would then take that as...
Sure.
And this is... I'm not trying to speak for all women or anything like that by saying this, but it is something I have seen a commonality among the women I have known. There is this fantasy of taking the bad boy
and turning him
into a good boy. that it's like, ooh, he's mysterious and sexy, and that part of him I like. But
cold. Maybe I can be the one to break down his wall. And get to know the real.
And that's going to validate how desirable I am, right? I got this person who would never accept anyone else into their heart.
Right.
I got them to accept me into their heart. If Squall goes with her and plays along, even just in the little tiny bit that he's capable of at this point, she's going to see that sliver of an opening, and the fantasy will just blow up out of control. And she'll be like, okay, I have to win now.
And you feel like that is happening, but for some players that isn't, because they're only choosing the cold answers.
If he completely shuts her out, she's going to start wanting to look elsewhere. That's what I feel.
Right. That would be logical.
It would be really good if there are other women who are watching the podcast to get some perspective from girls on this. What do they think about why does Rinoa like Squall if you choose the cold answers, right?
A lot of women do like Final Fantasy VIII, specifically relative to, a lot
they
of
like the romance in it, right?
They like that particular part of it. And so clearly there is something there. Maybe when they play it, they choose the warmer answers. I don't know. But when you're trying to be Squall, it makes more sense to choose the colder answers.
Chrissy was watching me while I was streaming a little bit of this part, because you go into the infirmary and Dr. Katawaki or whatever her name is, she's like, "Oh, is this your girlfriend?" Teasing him, and you can say yes or like no way, right?
And she's like, I would say no way, right?
Yeah,
because
that's how he would say it. But if you say yes.
oh, come on, can't you just pretend for 2 seconds? That's what she says if you say no.
If you say no.
Yeah.
If you say yes, she's like, wait a minute. Are you being serious? Because I'm going to take you seriously if you say yes. And you can say yes again.
Oh, wow.
And she's like, oh, wow, like I never would have. And then he's like, yes, I'm seriously joking or something like that.
But still.
Which is meant to be playful,
that's
probably.
Still warm and playful,
It's meant to be playful and teasing, I guess.
Right.
So, like, again, two completely dramatically different ways of how you can view Squall and Rinoa's budding relationship.
Right.
It can either be Squall being just 100% cold and distant
really
and shut out.
Unhealthy. That could reflect some daddy issues on Rinoa's part, though, that she has with her father, given that she will still pursue someone who's that cold.
I guess there's probably something to that.
There might
Maybe
be.
there is,
there
right?
might be.
But I guess my point is just to say that how you view the romance of this story really depends so much on how you choose to speak to her.
So if they didn't give us that freedom, the story would make more sense.
It would be much better,
I
feel, if they just let him do all the warm responses. I would believe it way more.
What do you think the game gains by having a variety of responses versus what they lose?
A sense of role-playing. That's it. Literally, that's all.
And it's not even much, because I don't know. I feel like whenever you try to change your answers or whatever, or you say something else, the next dialogue box will be different. But for the most part, everything else just continues on how it was. You're not actually changing it.
Exactly. It's like
so it helps a little bit with interactivity.
Yeah.
But I end up always choosing the cold answers anyways, because that's how I feel Squall is.
Yeah.
And so I don't feel that that's a very valuable gift, versus the cost.
It doesn't.
Of not understanding
it doesn't.
the story.
It's not conducive to this story they're trying to tell, to give you options there. Yeah. It would be more conducive to take that option away and make Squall be like this.
And you just go to the next box.
Yeah.
And you can still say yes or no, I guess, but in terms of how mean you are, because sometimes the cold answer does make sense as to how he's feeling at that time.
Yeah.
At that point.
Especially in Disc 1 when he's like,
especially in Disc 1.
Why the freak? You people are completely unorganized, and we really don't like the way you're doing this.
Wouldn't work well for that. But then at other places, the warm answer does. But I have a hard time judging exactly how Squall's feeling at that time, because sometimes you learn later on in that conversation that he's going to have another meltdown and blow up.
Yeah.
But you didn't know that at the beginning, and so you picked a different answer. Anyways, it would make a lot more sense. I don't feel like you gain much either. So I'd rather have that game. Maybe you could reprogram it to only pick certain ansers. That'd be interesting.
So for those of you who are playing the game for the first time, like alongside us,
this is good to know.
This is something you should know.
Yeah.
Leading into some like big payoffs coming up in the romance side of FF8.
Yeah.
I would personally suggest choosing the warm answers for Squall in his interactions with her.
Sure.
Throughout the rest of the game, through Disc 2 and throughout the rest of the game. Because it's the only way that this relationship really starts to bloom in a way that is convincing to me.
Sounds about right.
So anyways, one other thing I want to say about the garden there while you're going around is you go into the library and the girl from the beginning of the game is sitting there at the back side, and you can talk to her a little bit, and she well,
because that white boat comes up, right?
Well, it's actually, you can do it before then. So you have to find her after the boat comes up. But you can actually find her before that happens.
I wonder if I did or not. I don't think I did.
And talk to her a little bit. And she essentially, I'm trying to remember when, because there are two different points we talked to her, but at one point she starts to suggest, like, I really hope you would remember me, right? Like, try to remember who I am, please. Like, it would really hurt my feelings if I was completely forgotten by you and others. And so there's this suggestion again.
I do remember that.
That like they've lost their memories somehow.
As we thought, or as we mentioned earlier with the GF.
Which is the criticism of using GF, that it would affect your memory.
Even as they are realizing they're losing memories, they still don't initially accept that it's the GF. So no, that's just propaganda.
Yeah,
so they don't really get that.
But we're seeing more and more evidence that like something's wrong with Squall's memory, and this girl that he should know, he doesn't know her. Anyways, you go and you find Sid eventually.
I believe at several points, I think I'll mention it at this point, because I'm pretty sure at least by this point he has had at least one of these dreams of himself on a rainy, stormy night where he's like crying,
Yes.
and he's saying, "Sis,
Yeah.
I miss you, but I'll be strong without you." You
Yeah.
know?
Exactly.
Those parts get to me actually. That's like because it's just this kid. He looks like maybe 5, maybe.
Yeah, he's real young.
And you know it's all rainy, and he's just like alone, and you don't know exactly his situation, but it has happened. We'll get to this later, but it's happened several times where he visualizes himself as a little kid being abandoned. He's alone.
Yeah.
In the rain. So
Yeah, and he's talking about sis
some big sis
has gone away,
has gone
and
somewhere
he's
or has
trying
died
to promise
or
her,
something.
I'll be okay, I'll make it on my own, I'll
Yeah.
take care of myself.
Right.
But he is obviously struggling
Well, he's like
with
5.
his
He's like a little
abandonment,
kid.
right?
Yeah.
So we're starting to see that
Yeah.
onion get peeled back a little bit, the
Yes.
layers, right?
And we see the beginning of his troubles. It's not anything recent. It
Yeah.
goes way back
Way
to his
back,
childhood.
and he can't remember a lot of it, but he
Right.
remembers this particular scene in the rain.
Yeah.
And so she's, pleading with him to try to remember. Okay, so a couple more things happen in the garden. One is you go find Sid. He's down in the basement. He's arguing with somebody.
Yes.
He's very upset.
Shouting, yeah.
He's calling him a son of a
Swearing,
bitch, and
yeah,
like
just this whole big
very out of
mess.
character for him.
Yeah,
Very embarrassing for him to
Yeah.
be seen in that.
Because he's like, oh, you shouldn't have seen me. Like he didn't
Yeah.
know you were there watching.
Yeah, and so you find out that the garden master is this giant shumi
You don't
person
know what he's the first Shumi that you meet.
that you see in the game.
And that's fascinating that that's the choice they
Yeah.
made was to have him be the first because
Yeah.
he is a counter example to how
Who
that
the
species
Shumi
is.
are. Yeah.
But he is just this slob, like this absolute Jabba the Hutt, just
Yeah.
this absolute mess of a person.
Slimy, greedy,
Yes.
power-hungry guy.
And doesn't even really have good grammar.
No,
The way he talks is hysterical.
It's really weird how he
did
talks.
someone like that become a
I
powerful
don't know.
person?
But-
I always wondered that about Jabba the Hutt too, though. In all fairness.
But he funded this garden.
Yes, he
right?
had a lot of
So
money.
Sid, and what's revealed is that Sid and Edea
yes.
are married.
They're married. Because he says it. He says that blasted married couple.
Yeah, that's when it's
they're-
revealed.
And you're like, who? He's like, oh, Edea and the headmaster. Like, are you kidding me?
Like they're married.
sorceress
What the
and the
freak?
headmaster
Okay, what's
are
going on with that, right?
Yeah.
And so the two of them and this Shumi
What's his name?
Norg?
Norg. That's it, Norg.
essentially founded
Yeah.
the garden, and he financed it.
Yeah, he financed it, and then the headmaster kind of
And
dealt
they
with all of the
they,
education stuff.
They founded it for the purpose
Yes.
of defeating the sorceress.
Defeating the sorceress.
That was the point of Seed.
Yes.
And all of these missions they go on are all preparing them for the ultimate
practice,
mission
yeah.
of defeating the sorceress.
Yes.
Edea was part of this founding.
She helped do it.
She helped set it up on
Yeah.
purpose to defeat the sorceress. She is now
That's
the
fascinating.
sorceress.
That's very fascinating.
So it's kind of like, what on earth's going on here?
Yes.
You fight Norg because he's going to
You-
sacrifice you.
He wants to deliver you up as the assassins of Edea,
Yes.
the initial assassins. So he's like, "Oh, we struck a deal with Galbadia Garden. We're going to give up the assassins
Yeah.
to them in return
So that they won't retaliate.
kill us."
Yeah. Yeah. So obviously Norg at some point lost focus of the
Yes.
point and is now trying to run it for his own means.
Yeah.
That's why the garden faculty are always in opposition with Sid.
Uh-huh.
It's because Sid represents the original purpose of Balamb Garden, and Norg is trying to co-opt the whole thing and do his own thing
and
with
make
it now.
lots of money. Apparently,
Yeah.
it's a big, big money maker.
Big enterprise for himself.
So we make a correction on this in the next episode, and I'm going to leave that in the next episode, episode 4. What happens is he goes into a cocoon. It's kind of like a glowing red cocoon thing, and he begins his metamorphosis as a Shumi. We'll talk a little bit more about what implications this might have in the next episode, but I just know a lot of people are going to be like, no, he's not dead. He's evolving, or he's going through metamorphosis. We're aware of that now, and we'll touch on it later. But I just wanted to throw in there, we're aware now that you didn't kill Norg in this fight.
And then you have the scene where Seeds, and this is really where it gets crazy, Edea's seeds show
from
up
Galbadia, yeah.
to take Ellone
Galbadia,
away.
right?
Well, they're actually different.
No, there's a name.
maybe,
There's a name of their garden. It may not be Galbadia.
I don't know,
can't
but
remember.
they're different seeds, and
They are.
they're not like they're Edea's seeds, but they're not currently allied with Edea.
No.
And they're here to take this girl away
From Edea.
From Edea.
Yes.
So they're Edea's seeds who are trying to keep Edea, who is currently right now, like, number one goal, find this girl.
Yeah.
That's like her one purpose is to find this girl. And these Edea's seeds are taking her away and keeping her hidden. So it's like all these mysteries are like...
And everything together, it's very, very confusing
It's
as
like,
to
what's
who
going
the
on?
sorceress is, why all this stuff is happening.
Yeah, a bunch of new mysteries unfold.
This white boat shows up. You think they're here to fight. They're not. And they just want this girl. And she goes willingly.
Yeah.
Right? But
And this is where you learn that she is
you
Ellone.
learned that she's Ellone.
Ellone from
She's
the dreams.
22 years old or something.
Yeah.
She's, and she even admits to altering...
Sending you into the past. Trying
to alter the past through their dreams.
Yeah,
their
trying to
dreamlike
change
state.
what happened.
And Squall's like, why are you doing this? Like, what's the point? She's like, and she's too vague. She won't say much, and she's got to go. She's leaving.
Yeah.
So Squall doesn't have the time to really grill her the way he wants to.
Yeah.
But he's very concerned that he
like,
doesn't know who she is.
She has this power to send people into the past, to try to change the past. And
change
Edea is after that power.
Yes, that power.
The sorceress wants the power to change the past somehow.
Yeah.
And that's like the one thing she's after. But Edea is the sorceress, and Edea also has seeds keeping her away and hidden. So it's like, what's going on here? This starts to come to fruition right at the end of the disc.
Yeah.
But okay, so then the garden crashes into Fisherman's Horizon.
Well, I love that scene, by the way. The fisherman's just sitting there.
Sitting there fishing.
This huge
like,
garden. And they even mentioned it. You talk to someone in the town, and they're like, "You heard of the legendary, the fisherman's master, the master fisherman? Oh man, I heard that when your garden showed up, he waited till the very last second to run away before."
So dedicated to
he's so
fishing.
dedicated to his work. It's like, oh my god.
Fisherman's Horizon is a nice little kind of unwinding, sort of releasing of the tension sequence in the story.
Yeah.
A lot of really good, funny moments here. A lot of background information that you can get optionally. Some of my favorite scenes are like you go into this house and there's a Galbadian soldier that's like harassing the guy.
Yes.
And he's like,
the grease
he's
monkey.
like, all right, man, let's step outside and we'll take it out. He's like, all right, man, I'll meet you out there. And you go outside. The dude never comes out. You go back in and he like jumped out the window or something and like ran away. You can go back there again with Irvine alone later and the same guy is there and he's like, oh, you're by yourself this time, huh? All right, why don't we just step outside? And like you go outside and Irvine's like, I don't want to fight because Irvine's more of a lover than a fighter, right? I don't want to go outside. He's like, oh, you're going to fight right now. And so he goes outside. He doesn't come out. You go back in. He's like unconscious on the floor. And the little Moomba toy, beat him up or whatever. so
he's just a total wuss.
There's lots of little funny things like that.
I like that, yeah.
Martine, who was originally the Galbadian headmaster of the Galbadian Garden. He's here now.
His life is just in shambles.
Yeah, he's down on his luck. It's a new start. That's kind of what Fisherman's Horizon is all about.
Yes.
It's all about you've lost everything. You come here for a new beginning, kind of a place.
I think the idea in general is like you lose. Like you've got this big empire and you lose your job and what do? You rent a trailer and you go down by the river and you just go fishing for a while, just to clear your mind, you know? And that's essentially Fisherman's Horizon. It was actually a bunch of like technicians and engineers, right? A bunch of like builders came there.
Because they were from Esthar originally.
Oh, right. They had initially built.
If you do all of the Master Fisherman's side quest, he reveals that the leader, the mayor, and himself, they came from Esthar.
Yes.
They were in the government at Esthar.
That's
and
right.
they were unhappy with like the militaristic direction that the country was going in. So they left and they founded this town of Fisherman's Horizon.
And Fisherman's Horizon is kind of right along a highway.
Yeah, it's a highway that connects the two continents.
Esthar, yeah.
So from Galbadia all the way to Esthar, there's this one highway that stretches all the way across the ocean, and right in the middle of it is Fisherman's Horizon.
And it's funny, there's even a scene later on where there's can't remember who it is, the father of the kid who wants to become a fisher.
Yeah.
And he's hilarious.
That scene's really funny.
And when you go there with the master fisherman, the guy is saying, oh, tell him about the founding of this village. How'd you come up with the name? And he's like,
I thought it sounded good.
Thought it's Fisherman's Horizon.
Like,
sounds pretty cool.
I thought it was deeper than that.
I thought it was, deeper. He's like, I thought it was the horizon of hope when you go fishing. I can't remember what he said.
Yeah.
And the old master fisherman was like, oh yeah, that sounds pretty good.
Yeah, it's because Squall is suggesting what he thought it meant.
I think there was something like that.
He's like, you're right. You got it. Nail it on the head or whatever.
But he's totally just making it. He's getting old. He's funny.
A lot of good stuff happens here.
I love it. It's very nice, serene.
And the music. This is one of my favorite one of my favorite tracks in the whole series of Final Fantasy is the Fisherman Horizon theme, because it embodies that feeling, that kind of duality of this hopeless state you're in, having escaped a life or come so far down on your luck or losing everything, but having some kind of hope for the future. Right. It embodies hope and this depression and sadness in this complete harmony together. The two feel like they're not at odds with each other. It's just this perfect meshing of sadness and hopefulness in one piece that represents what Fisherman's Horizon is all about. And it's beautiful.
Even the mayor, who, it's funny because the way they portray him and the way he portrays himself, I mean, he's a hippie. Yeah. He doesn't want to fight. And
completely pacifist.
Absolutely. And even when events do happen, as such as some Galbadian military show up at Fisherman's Horizon looking for Ellone, otherwise they're going to burn the whole city down.
Yep.
And this mayor still refuses to fight.
Yeah.
And initially, when I first played it, I was like, he's so stupid, because he won't fight, but he doesn't know that you have to fight.
Yeah.
But after you kind of save him from some of these situations where he's in big trouble, and he says, he's like, I'm not going to say thank you to you. Yeah. I still feel like we didn't have to fight. And it's almost like the story of somebody who, it's just like sacrificial in a sense. Like the goal is more important than the means.
Yeah.
The ends aren't justified by the means. The means are the end. And you have to like actually live that and embody that. Otherwise, Fisherman's Horizon is meaningless.
Yeah, it's like the opposite of the consequentialist view, where it's like anything we have to do to get to our ends is justified.
It's the exact
If we have
opposite.
to kill, if we have to whatever, as long as we get this outcome, it's worth it.
Yeah.
And to him, it's like, no, whatever the outcome is, we must live this principle because the principle is correct.
Yeah.
So it's like the opposite.
If it's like, oh, stupid old man, we saved your life. Like he, as far as I can tell, he would gladly give his life so that this city can continue to be peaceful.
Yeah.
Right. Like that's the goal. He would consider it a good sacrifice. Whereas, thinking of it from Squall and everyone else's perspective, like, you're dead, dude. Like, why would you do that? What's in it for you? But it's beyond that.
Yeah.
It's more about preserving this style that they have, this lifestyle.
Right. So that's why they're so hesitant to receive anyone from Seed to begin with, because like, you guys are militaristic, you're warmongers. We don't want you around here.
You believe in fighting.
We'll help fix your garden and then just get out because we don't want you around here.
That's right. Because as soon as you first visit the mayor, he's like, I'm going to be as forward as I can with you. When are you leaving?
Yeah.
And you're just like, you don't like us here, do you? Let's just say that you guys have weapons and other people with weapons follow people with weapons.
Yeah.
It's
you're going to bring the fight here.
So please leave.
Yeah. So
now, even though you can look at the actual event and say, oh, they saved the town from getting burnt or whatever, I feel like there's a little more power in the mayor's message than I initially thought when I first played the game.
Doesn't accept the violence.
He's still
despite the fact that we say.
Yeah, you just like broke our rules. Like, good job.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think it's a good point. But anyway, so a lot of good stuff that happens there. But eventually, there's a concert scene.
Oh yeah.
Selphie is really feeling down because she wasn't able to stop the missiles from launching on Trabia. She's really worried about Trabia Garden.
And when we crashed into Fisherman's Horizon, I think her whole
stage got
collapsed.
Broke. Yeah. And so you're looking for a way to cheer her up. So Squall and Irvine go over there, and like we said, you can either choose to have Irvine do it, and he wants that because he's trying to make a move on her.
Because he wants it, but he knows that you would really.
Yeah.
It would be nice if you
went and did it.
And I kind of did it both ways. I don't know if you could have continued it longer, but I tried to cheer her up for a while, and then I said,
Irvine, why don't you
Irvine, you step in. Yeah. I don't know if that's how it's supposed to go, but that's how it went for me.
That's how Irvine is happy for it to go.
Yes, and he's like, sure thing, man, I'll step in.
Thanks,
and
bro.
in parentheses, time to make my move.
Time to make my move, yeah. But they decide to go through with this concert anyway. So the rest of the group, they sort of like, plan this out. They play different instruments. You can kind of select which instruments they play. In any case, this all becomes a setup as well for them to try to like get Squall and Rinoa together.
And in keeping with the silliness of this whole game, Zell himself is like, none of us can play instruments. And then you give him a fiddle and he's just going to town, just and he's just like, he's very good.
They're very good at it.
He's extremely talented at it. And they're pretending like they didn't know how to play instruments. I thought that was funny.
Yep.
But yeah, you and Rinoa go out, and the whole thing is like they're putting it on for you guys.
Yep.
And the Fisherman's Horizon is set up of these like I think they're solar panels with the whole city.
Yeah. Maybe. Yeah.
It's what they look like, and it kind of looks like a dance floor when you stand on it.
Yeah.
Right? So Rinoa kind of pushes you off onto it, and you're standing on this reflective surface that resembles a dance floor, and it's just this beautiful.
So before she pushes him down, I write one note here.
There's a naughty magazine.
Well, there's that, right?
So
Irvine left it behind. I don't know why.
He says he did it on purpose.
Here's the spot where I want you to go to. You'll notice it because of the magazine that's there. That's the spot.
And then when you go there, Squall's like, he was being serious. Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
This guy's freaking crazy.
But I have a developer quote for this part because in kind of their playfulness and banter back and forth, or at least Rinoa continually trying to open him up, crack him, right?
Yeah.
She teases him and he reaches back to like hit her and she rolls away.
That's right, yeah, very quickly.
So here's a quote from Kitase. He says, there's a scene where Squall and Rinoa are talking at Fisherman's Horizon, and I don't remember what the conversation was about exactly, but Rinoa says something that's kind of sassy to Squall, and he throws his hand at her.
Yeah, he throws it back.
Yeah, she dodges. But even at the time, Kazushige, Nojima, the writer, was like, he shouldn't be hitting her. It's really not good to have a guy hitting a girl. Looking back, I wish I could change that. So this is something he regrets, having had Squall like actually threaten to hit her. Now, of course,
Japanese culture is a little.
It is different.
And men still don't hit women, generally speaking. But a senior can threaten a junior, and physically hitting is a common.
Even maybe in Korea, right? Where
yes, in Korea
do you want to die?
Yeah, chugale.
It might be a little more culturally acceptable.
Yes.
Here, it's definitely not. You don't hit girls ever.
Yeah.
But the reverse is not true. So, like anyone who's watched like my streams with Chrissy, and our teasing, she'll hit me a lot.
Yes.
And it's like, that's an acceptable thing.
Yes.
And obviously that's the intention with this, right? Squall was not intending to do harm.
Not from what I can tell. And the way she dodged it, it was almost like, haha,
and she clearly knows he's not trying to hurt me. Yeah. So like, I get the intention, but just an interesting note that he felt bad about that. After the fact.
In that aspect, the game did not age as well, I suppose. But
it maybe didn't age that well. You know? But the conversation that they have when she pushes him down, is very revealing for his abandonment trauma. This is where it really starts coming out in what he's thinking when she's talking to him. Like, just like, no, I don't, it would be worse to accept you all into my heart and lose you than it would be to just stay alone.
And I think once again he has that flashback.
Yep.
Where
it brings it up
big
again.
Sis left, and I think the whole point with that was, that he said, when you get close to somebody, and you just lose them in the end anyways.
Yeah.
And like, what's the point of getting close to somebody if you're just going to lose them?
Yeah.
Like, we're all bound for different paths and different lives, and if you're just going to get lost anyways, I don't want to invite you in, because his big sister, Ellone, left him.
Yeah.
And I don't think he understands why.
He doesn't remember or understand the reason.
He doesn't remember who she is. He and this is indicative of his character. He doesn't remember her.
Yeah.
He just remembers losing her.
Yeah.
So he's got this memory of, oh no, my big sis left. And even when he sees her again, he doesn't know who she is.
Yeah.
But he still remembers losing her. And that shows kind of his personality, where he's at in his life. He is more concerned about losing things than the thing itself.
Well, and this is so true of human nature. Yeah. This is why we tend to cling to like negative press rather than positive press. It's like part of the reason why that's more effective is because you can be only so happy. Yes. And what that means to us versus you could be dead.
And so like you can descend, well, the way he puts it, you can descend the greatest depths of hell before you even die, or you can die.
And that is worse to us than this is good to us.
So have you ever heard the saying of, like, in a good relationship amongst most people, generally speaking, you need to have one bad interaction, or no, you don't need to have it, but you need to have 10 good interactions for every one bad interaction.
Yeah.
Because the good interactions only raise you so much. Bad interactions drop you a lot.
Way worse.
And if that ratio's off, if you're having only 2 good interactions for every 1 bad interaction, you're just like into negative territory here. You need to have at least, to maintain a net positive, you have to at least have 10 good to 1 bad. And I feel like Squall is, he's in a different place where he's like so far down that the good things aren't even worth it because of how far down you can go.
Well, I think it was so apt that you brought up that he doesn't even remember who his big sis is.
He values losing something more than the thing.
The loss of it, the negative emotion is so powerful that it doesn't even matter that he loved. He doesn't even remember who he loved.
See, and
the loss is more memorable and traumatic and has totally shaped his psychology. And that is 100% accurate to the way human psychology works.
I think so, I think so.
It doesn't even matter who the person we lost is. The emotion, the trauma was so bad that we'll do anything to protect ourselves from ever going there again.
Yeah.
And so we are designed to protect ourselves from harm more than we are to pursue good. Yeah. And so, like, it's just
and that is so an evolutionary thing.
Yeah, it's a biological
good
truth.
Things can only get you so good, but if you make a mistake, you're dead, right? And so, like, you see a tiger. You've never seen a tiger before.
Yeah.
Right? You're a little caveman.
Yeah.
Never seen a tiger before. Those who had the natural instinct of it's new, I don't know what it is, I'm avoiding it.
Yeah.
Those are the ones that survive.
Who protect themselves from harm first.
The ones who are like, oh, it's new and different, I'm going to go find out what it is. They didn't make it.
Yes.
Right? And so, and that's not just the newness, that's the whole idea, the concept that there's more things that can kill you than can help you in the world. And if you're playing it safe, then you're going to last longer.
Yes,
right?
you'll survive
and that's
longer.
Squall has kind of come to that point where he feels like he'll have the greatest longevity if he avoids anything that even resembles something that could
relationship
be valuable in any way.
Or depending on anyone else or growing close to anyone.
Because it sounds like from that flashback, you only get a few sentences, but he really, really was close to Ellone.
Yeah.
And he really relied on her. And he's convincing himself that he can be strong without her, but he knows, you can tell in his voice, and he's crying, his voice that you're imagining his voice, right? Because you're not hearing anything. But you can hear it in his voice, so to speak, that he doesn't believe himself, that he knows that he really can't do it himself, right? But he needs to. He doesn't have a choice. So he figures out a way to do it, and this is the way he figured out.
Yeah. So as far as character arc for Squall is going so far, I just think it's actually really, really, really well written. It's very convincing and very true to how people with his personality type and people with his type of trauma would respond or how they would behave.
Absolutely.
The only thing that I regret that they did was giving you the choice to be cold to Rinoa, because the relationship is so important to healing this and to him coming out of his shell and learning to trust in people. She's so important to that character arc that if you choose to reject, it's just hard for me to believe that relationship would ever really develop in the way it needs to for his character arc to finish in a satisfying way.
It feels like it comes out of nowhere.
But as far as all of his internal dialogue and his reasons for wanting to stay away from people, all of that is so true to life. So really, really good stuff there.
I think that's well done. And then Rinoa, it's Rinoa's character, I think, that I have the hardest time with. It's not so much Squall. It used to be Squall's character that I was like, it doesn't make sense to me. This playthrough, it's more Rinoa's character that I have a difficult time understanding a little bit.
Yeah.
But let's move on, because once we can finally leave Fisherman's Horizon, this is where the game goes crazy.
You can do all kinds of side quests.
It's not. We probably did completely different things as each other.
I mean, I did all the chocobo forests.
I didn't even go there.
So there's a bunch of chocobo forests.
I do.
It's a really lame. It's a really lame minigame.
I know.
I hate Final Fantasy minigames because they almost always depend on RNG.
Yes.
Or some element of that, or just very vaguely not well explained rules to things.
Yeah.
And anyways, this one's not as bad.
Yeah.
On those terms. Like, the RNG is more applied to the card game.
Yeah.
Are they going to play the card I'm trying to win from them this time?
How many times
I'm going to challenge you 50 times before you'll finally play the Quetzalcoatl card or whatever.
Exactly. And then hopefully you win.
And then oh crap, he actually played it. Fetch, I haven't saved, and anyways. or like the random rule, like some of the rules for the card game. It's
from the different cities.
It's more to do with the card game. The RNG is not. I'm not talking about the Chocobo minigame, but the Chocobo minigame is not necessarily a fun game, but it's at least not as tedious as like Chocobo Hot and Cold in Final Fantasy IX, or as long as the Chocobo breeding in FF7.
Yeah.
So I can tolerate it. But I did that. I went to Shumi Village.
No, me too.
And did all that stuff.
That was fascinating. Get all the stones and everything.
Yeah, you learn more about the Shumi, and that they can evolve into essentially either the Moomba or they choose a form.
Or the great... Oh, yeah, some of them say that, I can become a human, right?
Yeah, they can turn into whatever form they want to be, or they become a Moomba, or they turn into an elder who like ends up leading the Shumi or whatever.
Yeah.
And their responsibilities to stay there. So, there's lots of kind of cool background you get with that. And then what other side quests are there?
I went to Delling City. Oh, you go back to Balamb. That's kind of more story related though, so I guess that's different.
Oh, when it's under the city, the village is under siege.
Yeah, and all the police are there. But I went to Delling City, and this was wonderful. I forgot to mention it last podcast. You go into the room with the painter. He's got this big painting, and then there's his son who painted a dog bone.
This is in Dullet. This is in Dullet.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
I meant Dullet. He painted a dog bone on it.
and
it's so funny because...
You can go find the dog.
Yes, and you go because you recognize
to those locations
the painting.
that are in Dullet.
Yeah. And there's usually not anything too great there. But the bone, the kid's talking about how it's like his artistic expression.
To like ruin his grandpa's paintings with
the
dog bone.
And his grandpa's like, this is stupid, you're worthless. And the kid's like, no, I'm just expressing myself. Artists need to fight for their rights to be heard. And yeah, it's so funny.
And as you begin to resolve that side quest, he's like, it's because you never like spend time with me, but you will with these other girls in the city and stuff. It's because you keep ruining my paintings. I don't want to. It's like, it's a funny little side quest.
Yeah.
And that boy is the son of the Queen of Cards.
Oh, yeah.
And I think that painter is her father. So like, anyways, if you're doing the Queen of Cards side quest, which can be very long and tedious in and of itself, you keep going back to Dullet.
I did that.
And you can win the cards back that you lose to her.
Because there's that secret. There's like not secret, but there's like a room up in above
like a cafe,
a bar, something like that.
Yeah,
where there's this group of people that you play cards with. But I also went to what's the city that Laguna and Ellone were living in? Yeah, Windhill. You can go there, and that's where there's like another
side quest for the vases,
chocobo thing with the vases, the
vase pieces. Yeah.
That was fun, but mostly like. You don't even, necessarily know it right away, but apparently Rain has passed away, but she had these flowers. And
thank you for bringing that up.
Yeah.
I never knew this. It is in Disc 2, so it's not a spoiler. You can go, actually, one of our viewers had to tell me this. I didn't even know this. He had to tell me to go look at this. It was Chocolate Rob. You go into the menu. You go into the menu, in the tutorial section of the menu, and you go into the info. It has a whole... I think it depends on what your dialogue options were during the first flashback at the beginning of the disc with Laguna and Kiros, because you can ask about Julia.
Oh, right.
And like what happened to her, and they can talk about she got married to a general, and he's like, as long as she's happy, who cares?
As long as she's happy, who cares?
Like, hey, come on, Ellone, let's he's trying to avoid the conversation.
Yeah. He doesn't want to talk about it.
But apparently she wrote a song called Eyes on Me,
right?
Which is like the theme song of the game.
For the game, yeah.
That's about her lost love that she, they went off to war and she never saw him again.
Right.
Anyways, so if you go through that dialogue correctly, I think, this will come up in the info in the menu, that she died in a car accident at the age of 28.
Rain did.
So, no, Julia.
Julia did.
So Julia, who married General Caraway, right? Who is Rinoa's father?
When you go there,
died at a young age. You start to put the pieces together. Julia is Rinoa's mother.
Right.
Not that that's necessarily a very important thing to the plot, but Julia is Rinoa's mother.
Yeah.
And just keep that in mind for something we're going to learn a little bit later. But I don't think it mentions. I don't think it mentions anywhere else in the game what happened to Julia. Julia just doesn't exist anymore.
She's just not around.
She just isn't there, and they never talk about her. You don't know what happened. but if you look in that info, it says that she died in a car accident or something.
Okay, nice.
But Rain, same thing with Rain, right? It's kind of mysterious, like what happened to her.
Mysterious.
She's not here anymore.
She apparently died pretty recently once you arrived to that village, because they're still talking about her and saying, oh, she was the best at these flowers, and she would cook food or something.
Yeah.
But you do, there's tons of side quests. You can always dock your ship back at Fisherman's Horizon to explore and walk around. And that's when I went and read all of the diary entries and all of the stuff that Selphie had written, and all of the what else, like her board, and you get to read some of Zell's kind of random thoughts. And stuff. So
because she's like keeping a diary, and each of the party members like write a little entry into it.
They can write a little. And
I think I read Irvine's, and nobody else had written one at the time I looked at it, except for Irvine. But
Selphie's going through a lot of Laguna's stuff, and she's going through, the.
Did you encounter the UFO?
I don't.
So there's this little UFO that it's a random battle you'll come across in certain areas, and you'll just stand there, and this UFO is like carrying a cow away. And then there's like little places throughout the world where you can encounter it.
I did hit a random thing though. So I did do the summon. I played a bunch of cards, by the way.
Yeah.
But I also did the summon where you go. What is it called again? You go to the place. It's like this big. Tall
Pandemonia
castle.
or Odin.
Yeah. Odin.
I think the Odin side
because
quest,
you got to put the eyeballs in, and
the
it gives
red
you the
eyes,
numbers.
Yeah.
Which
you have
is
to remember
hilarious.
the code.
There's some code. I guess it's randomly generated each time, so you can't just skip it. But towards once you finish that and you leave, you fight this weird little green cloaked dude. What's he
Tonberry.
called? Yeah, Tonberry.
Tonberry.
There's a bunch of Tonberries. You fight enough of them, and this
King
Tonberry shows up.
And you can get that as a GF.
Yeah, that's fascinating. I looked up to do that. I would not have known to do that.
Yeah, there are a ton of GFs
otherwise.
that you probably don't get if you're not going by a guide.
I've heard, there's like the big cactus looking dude that's in a bunch of Final Fantasy games.
Yeah.
I don't know where you'd find him, but I think he's in the game. And yeah, there's a bunch.
Yeah, I mean, and this is, I'm going to save this conversation for later about like the game mechanics, because we would talk for 5 hours if we were including game mechanics, but a lot of the game's breakability, its easiness, I guess, stems from knowing ahead of time, I can get this particular GF by drawing it from this boss. If you don't draw it, you don't get that GF. You don't get Siren, you don't get, who's the other one? I think it's Pandemonia or something that you draw from a boss. I think it's Fujin or Raijin or something like that.
Oh, yeah.
There's like three GFs you draw from bosses, and then there's Odin you can completely miss. There's Diablos you can completely miss.
Yeah.
And so it's like there's all these abilities that you get from these GFs that if you don't have, you're pretty weakened as like a party. There's like a lot of things you can't do.
Right.
So,
and one last quick addendum, just because I got a few comments on this as well. I'm aware that you can get any of the GFs you missed in the final dungeon. So it's not like if you miss one along the way that you're permanently locked out from getting that GF. They do provide a way in the final dungeon of the game for you to acquire all the GFs and get all the abilities that you want to. So anyways, there were just a lot of people who commented on that. So if you do miss something, they provide a place at the end of the game so that you don't have to permanently miss on any of these GFs or their abilities.
I think the game's balance, whether the game is hard or not, really depends on, do you get all the GFs? Do you learn all the abilities? Do you take advantage of the card refining? Do you play the card game at all? It can either be a really, really difficult game by the end, if you don't have all of these tools, or it can be, I mean, at this point in the game, I kill everything in one hit with physical attacks.
Nice.
Everybody. I just go, plump, they're dead. Plump, they're dead. Plump, they're dead. Everybody dies in one hit.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter if it's a boss. Just you're dead, almost completely. I mean, not exactly that, but it's approaching that level of easiness. I don't have to cast magic at all. I just attack with standard attacks. I do 5,000 damage a hit.
Sick.
So, but one thing people really like about it is that you can then tailor the difficulty. You can create your own sense of challenge, right?
Similar to how the dialogue options can kind of ruin the story a little bit, I feel like the gameplay options can ruin the gameplay as well. I think those two elements, the freedom of the ability you have to kind of alter those two things however you want, like you mentioned, altering difficulty or even altering the story to choose how the voice of the character however you want, might be those two reasons might be the reason why this game is so divisive.
Yeah.
And so many people either love it or
because
hate it. It depends
will
on how you
depend
played
on
it.
how you played it.
But it doesn't just depend on how you played it last time you played it. It depends on how you played it the first time you played
Yes.
it. Because first impressions are 90%
And the
of your
first time I
impressions of
played
the
it, I didn't like this game.
Me
Every
neither,
single
as much.
time I have played it afterwards, I have
Yeah.
liked it more and
Yeah.
more and more. And that's true of this time as well. I like the
too,
game more
actually.
this time than I did last time I
Yeah,
played
yeah.
it. I keep liking
It's
it more.
a really good game.
I love
and
it.
a lot of it, whether it's good or not, a lot of it is up to you.
Yes.
And you can make the game bad if you want to.
Yes.
Don't do it, but you don't realize you're making the game bad when you first played the game.
Yes.
That is a fundamental issue with Final Fantasy VIII.
Yeah.
That it's not even like a critique. It's just the design of the game can either lead to a great experience or a not great experience.
Yeah.
It makes so much more sense as we delve into this game why it's so divisive.
Why
to
it's
me now.
divisive, yeah.
Yeah.
Now, speaking of divisiveness, it's time to lead into possibly the most divisive plot point in the whole freaking game, which is after
We're going to Trabia, or which
after
one?
the sequence in Balamb Village where you kind of like beat up Fujin and Raijin and run them
They're
out.
fast. I like those characters, by the way.
I like them
fascinating.
too. They're actually really good because they bring up the whole tribalism thing you're talking about. It's like we're going to stick with Seifer to the end, no matter what, because he doesn't have anyone else.
Right. He's their group. What do you call it? The posse.
You gotta have real friends is kind of what they're talking about. And like there's a lot of people who follow Seifer's orders, but he doesn't have. But we're his only real friends, and we're not going to abandon him.
You know what's funny? That's so similar to Squall. If you think about it, Squall isn't a great friend to the people he's around.
Yeah.
And he doesn't really want friends, and he mostly is just kind of doing his own thing. But these people are trying to. I feel like Fujin and Raijin are the ones that are trying to get Seifer to like be himself or to let him feel more at ease.
Yeah.
And Seifer continues to give them the cold treatment because as you find out later in the game, even they're like, you know what, we want the old Seifer back.
We can't do this anymore. We want our old friend back. Yeah.
And I feel like that would be, had Squall made different life choices, that's where Selphie and Rinoa would have ended up too, with just leaving him because they're like, we like him, he's important, but we can't be around him anymore.
Yeah.
And that's essentially what happened with Raijin and Fujin. So they're fascinating. I like that point in the
It's a good little sequence there.
Yeah.
And then Selphie says, I really want to go to Trabia. I'm worried.
Yeah.
Let's go back to the garden and see what happened. So you go there, and
it's pretty jacked.
it's completely destroyed. She's talking with a lot of her friends and stuff who have survived.
Yeah.
And this is another point where I felt like, this criticism of FF8, that it has no character development, is just so wrong
I think
to
so.
me.
Because
there's this really great little scene where she's talking to her friends and you're going around and talking, and then you go to this, she went over to the graveyard.
Yes.
And you go over there and she's
constantly
kneeling,
going around places.
Yeah, she's kneeling at the grave, talking to her dead friends about, what she's doing and like the kind of...
that she made it, she's a seed.
And it really builds a real sense of who she is and what she cared about and what her aspirations were. It's a great character moment for Selphie.
I think so.
And it's like, again... Final Fantasy VIII doesn't do we arrived at this village, which is character B's hometown. Now we're going to go through a whole sequence telling of their tragic backstory. It doesn't do that kind of character development, but it definitely has good character development.
I think so.
And this is a great moment for Selphie, in my opinion. Yeah. Where she's always kind of the klutz, always kind of silly.
The kid who lost the teddy bear or something, and she's able to...
Yeah, she's talking to him about the teddy bear wants you to be strong. Yeah. And so the way she relates to these other kids at the garden, she has great memories here, great friends here who she lost. It's a really fantastic little scene. And it's small, but it's enough to give us a duality. There's more to Selphie than just...
being
the
silly,
klutz.
and tripping.
There's a lot more to her than that, and it's really strongly suggested here in Trabia Garden. But then she tells you to go wait by the basketball court, and this is where the most intense criticism of FF8's storytelling
this is the big reveal.
Comes into place.
I didn't mind it as much this time as I did the first time I played it, though.
Let's talk about what it is first, and then I want to hear why.
Okay.
So, it is revealed as they're talking to each other. And Irvine kind of starts the conversation. Now remember, Irvine comes from Galbadia Garden, where they did not use GFs.
Yes, yeah.
So he's only very recently, since joining our party, began to use GFs.
Yeah.
His memory has not been affected like the others. He basically starts suggesting, he's trying to cheer Selfie up or something, trying to talk about this orphanage he grew up in.
Oh, right. Yeah.
And all of a sudden, wait a minute. The orphanage you're talking about, was that near an ocean? Was it made of stone?
Oh, was it made of stone? Yeah,
You guessed it. You guessed it. And it's like, wait a minute.
They all have memories
I
of
came
it.
from there too.
Yeah.
Wait a minute. What? You knew this the whole time, Irvine? You never told us that we're from the same orphanage?
Yeah.
And it's like, well, it didn't seem like you guys remembered, so it was kind of awkward. And and it's like, wait a minute, Squall,
he's a weird
Zell
character.
was there too. Squall was, all of us came from the same orphanage and none of us remembered it. This scene, like we've been building up this entire podcast, can really feel like it comes out of the absolute abyss. Just like, what the fetch? Why? How? What are you talking about? They all grew up in the same orphanage and they all forgot why.
And it's just happen chance that they're all back together.
Yes.
That's how, what I
It
thought.
can feel very contrived
When I
and
first played
convenient and just like it's not set up at all.
Yeah.
And it's just why we've been trying to like build the audience up into this moment now. So what the big reveal is, they all grew up in the same orphanage. They all kind of got separated and some of them went to Trabia Garden, or Selfie went to Trabia Garden, Irvine went to Galbadia Garden, Zell got adopted into a family in Balamb Village.
He didn't even know he was adopted.
Yes, he forgot he was adopted.
He was like, so my parents aren't my real parents?
Yes.
It's like, woof.
So
He really
Squall
has
and
forgotten.
Seifer and Quistis were taken by Edea, who was their matron, and
Matron
Sid,
Edea,
who was her husband, to go found
Balamb
Garden.
Yeah.
And they have forgotten all of this because they've been using GFs.
Yeah.
So that's the big twist. That's the big reveal. Now, I would love to hear your perspective of why it didn't bother you this time as much.
So the first time I played it, I thought it was pure happenstance. Like, oh my gosh, we all happened to grow up in the same village together, and we forgot, and it just so happens every important character for this whole game was with us at that village.
Yep.
And wow, what are the odds? Okay, oh, isn't this crazy, guys? Oh my gosh, it's crazy. That's how I thought that it went. I have now that this is actually my third time playing the game. Playing it now and seeing, my understanding is that this was all set in motion from a long, long time ago, and that Ellone was actually kind of like central to this whole thing because she got adopted out first, and that's why Squall is like crying like, oh, big sis, I miss you, because he was in the orphanage. She was everyone's big sister. They all were around her, but she left. Sorry, my throat's getting dry. She left early, and the
abandonment
understanding
with Squall,
what her potential is, Ellone.
Oh, right. Yes.
The fact that she left first is actually important.
Yes.
And that she went somewhere just kind of out of everyone's reach.
Considering Edea was the matron, that she eventually became a sorceress, that she set up the seed to defeat the sorceress, and that she's trying to keep Ellone hidden from her now that she is the sorceress. The fact that she left first, I see where you're going with
Yes. So it all makes it was all part of the plan. So my initial thought was, oh, they randomly, even going to Galbadia, they just happened to pick up the one guy who was also in that orphanage too.
Yeah.
But this was all set in motion. This was literally planned by Sid and Edea to be this way. Squall was being raised with these people in this way to become what he is finding himself in the middle of becoming, right? And all these characters, they didn't randomly find each other. They were all brought here together on purpose for a reason. And one of the reasons being is that the sorceress needs to be killed. But that's not, gosh, see, how do I do this without, because at the end we kind of figure out some things. You want to kill the sorceress, but not the host of the sorceress. You need to have the sympathy to understand who the person is that the sorceress is using in order to kill the sorceress but not kill the host, because it would be too tempting to just kill the host and be done with it, right? So I believe it was some type of plan from Sid in order to get things moving so that he could still somehow be married to Edea, but have her not be a sorceress anymore.
Okay, so there's a lot of truth in what you're saying, and actually the way you just described it, I wish the game had done that. because
Is it
then
not
it would
the
have
true
actually.
interpretation?
Well, I don't know if it's not the true interpretation.
Yeah.
It probably is. In fact, I think it is. I think it actually, that is really what's going on. Like, and we'll get more on this later in the game, but Sid, like we've been saying, has sort of been weaning Squall into this leadership position.
Yes.
It's like he's fated to it somehow.
Yeah.
That's all I'll say about that for now. It will come into clearer focus at the end of the game. But this has definitely been planned. Edea was part of the plan, and Sid was part of the plan. So that distinction, that it's not coincidental,
It's not random,
it was
planned.
actually put in motion,
Just knowing that one fact makes it way more powerful.
changes the perspective
Way more
of the scene,
palatable. Yeah.
right? And I agree with that
and then,
part of it.
And then trying to figure out why this plan was put into motion and why these kids are part of the plan. That, to me, put another layer of meaning into this that I didn't initially have.
So this is, okay. Now that you said all of that, I'm going to have to like rework
I hope
what
I
I'm going to
didn't,
say.
like,
No, you didn't.
give away
no,
too
this
much.
is good.
'Kay.
Because like we're going to arrive at like I think the intention eventually here.
'Kay.
So, okay. Knowing even what we did know with all the background and lore and knowing that, okay, that the GF erasing memories has been set up before, we can expect this, it's coming, like even knowing that's going into it, I still really struggled to appreciate this scene because I just thought it was bungled so badly in its execution.
Yeah.
It is a problem to me that so much of that setup is totally out of the way and you can easily miss it. That would have been fine to leave that as it is if they had used Irvine's dialogue in the assassination scene at the end of Disc 1
such a missed
to
opportunity.
be the mandatory scene that serves as the setup for this.
Yeah.
If Irvine had been struggling to shoot the Sorceress because he knows
Because he
that's
recognized-
my matron.
Yeah.
She raised me in an orphanage and I can't shoot
Yeah.
her.
If that was...
He doesn't have to say
if
that out
one thing,
loud
I know, yeah.
because
I agree.
you can't spoil the twist.
Right.
But he can at least allude to it in the subtext
Yes.
much more strongly than he did.
And it's hard for me to believe that they really missed that opportunity.
Yeah.
I think there's got to be a reason why they just completely
Missed that
and went
missed
over it.
that opportunity. I don't know, but it needs it. I feel like the story would have been much stronger if his reasons for not wanting to shoot the Sorceress were made clear in the subtext, so that when you come to the scene, you go, "Oh, that's why Irvine wouldn't shoot her," right? Instead of going, "What? You all grew up in the same." I don't get it, right? Like they hid too many of the hints and the setups, instead of at least making one really strong setup for it.
At least that one.
So that's one reason why I don't think it ends up working as it's intended to work. But also, the reason why I don't love this as a plot twist is because I think really good plot twists, not only are they set up with the breadcrumbs in a way to make you go, "Oh, I should have seen that. Oh, I knew that. I just didn't
This one
realize
doesn't
it."
really do that.
It doesn't do that because it doesn't
Yeah.
hide them well. It doesn't hide them in plain sight.
Right.
It hides them way out of plain sight. But in addition to that, I think good plot twists change the character's perspective in such a way that they say, okay, we have to change what we're going to do now, or it changes our entire view on who a character is. I'm not going to spoil Final Fantasy VII, but I've done videos on why Final Fantasy VII's plot twist is so effective. We've talked about it on previous podcasts. It's absolutely brilliant the way they lead into it. And what ends up happening is that every time someone watches that scene, they go, "Oh my gosh! Oh wow! Like oh!" And it just works, and it just resolves it all in this perfect way.
This scene does not have that. That is true.
Nothing in the plot changes due to these revelations.
Yeah.
They show up to this scene with their goals are to kill Sorceress Edea, and to what was the and worrying about that GFs might be erasing their memories. So these are two concerns that they have.
Do they keep
we have to kill they have to kill Sorceress. GFs might be erasing our memories. This scene reveals that Edea is their matron.
Right.
A reason to give them pause for killing her.
Right.
And that GFs are actually erasing their memories. And what they decide are,
Well,
we're
keep
still
using
going
them
to kill the
anyways.
sorceress, and we're still going to use
And
GFs.
there's even the moment with Rinoa where she's like, "Do you think fighting is the answer?" And this goes back to the Fisherman's Horizon Mayor
Yes.
again, where it's like the multiple times they've tried to insert or submit the idea that maybe you don't have to kill people and maybe you don't have to fight like this in order to accomplish it. And I keep thinking it's going somewhere, and it's not.
Yeah.
You basically say, yeah, I see your point, but we're just going to keep fighting.
We're just going to, and that's essentially how they say
Rinoa
it.
kind of is like, well, if you all agree, I'll just keep going with you, I guess. But
Like-
she doesn't like it.
It's like they don't even have really any. They don't have any moment of pause. They don't even consider another option. They don't even
Right.
say, she's our matron, we can't kill her. There must be another way. Let's go on a quest to find some other way to save her.
Rinoa wasn't in that orphanage, right?
No,
And
she
so
wasn't.
The fact that she's the one saying,
Yes.
hey, let's be kind and not kill people, and everyone else who does know the matron is saying, no, she's got to go.
Yeah, there's not
And
even a
Why
moment.
is Rinoa the one? And she didn't even know matron.
There's not even one moment where they say, man, like, we can't do this. Let's find another way. They're just like, oh, nope, this is our fate. We chose this. We have to kill her.
And even
And then,
and this would be another point where at least what's his name?
Irvine.
Irvine, where at least he once again can give pause. Had they done that sooner, then that would make him leading the "let's not kill her" movement instead of Rinoa.
Absolutely.
It would make it even more powerful. It would make
Absolutely.
it make a little bit more sense. You still won't have the breadcrumbs where you say, "Oh my gosh, I should have known."
Yeah.
That can't happen for this kind. That can't happen here.
Even
But
with that bungle,
they could have softened it.
had they at least determined to change what they were currently doing in light of the new information that they had, which changes their whole perspective on who the sorceress is, whether or not they should use GFs.
Right.
Like GFs gives us these powers we need to defeat the sorceress, but we're losing who we are.
It's almost like that revelation should have come later. That revelation should have come around the time where it's too late, which we won't get into, I guess, at the moment. But that revelation should have come later instead of them knowing ahead of time, it is the GFs, this is the problem, but we got to kill the matron and we can't do it without GFs. So
And they seem to have no reservation about it. It's like they're completely on
Except
board.
for Rinoa.
And it's
She's
just
the one.
it makes it feel like these revelations are pointless because it changes nothing.
Yeah.
It changes nothing, not even just in the plot,
I
but
think you're
in their
right.
own minds.
And that's the biggest thing, yeah.
And so
in their
it
minds.
makes the whole thing feel like, again, had you not found the breadcrumbs, it feels totally out of left field.
Right.
It feels like a completely contrived thing. And they do not explain the part that you just explained, which is that
you have to beat the
Sid
game and play it again.
and Edea are weaning them into these roles. They're like fated to meet each other. They were. It's all part of a plan.
Yeah, they were being pushed.
That's
Even
not-
with Seifer, they were all being forced to be friends, even though they were fighting each other.
That's not explained well enough.
No, not at all. Yeah.
And so the execution of this scene, less so than the idea behind it, is really badly carried out.
That is true. Now, let me just throw something out here. It's hard to go back and replay a game for the first time. You just can't ever have that first time experience again. You are always going to be informed by your first time for your subsequent times, right? Understanding that, so despite the scene not giving me the info it should have given me, me knowing that info anyways, and understanding what was happening, did make everything come together a lot better. And it actually, I didn't feel, when I first played the game, I didn't feel anything for Matron, because it was all too weird and too quick and like out of left field, like you're saying. I didn't feel, I was like, whatever, just kill her, I don't care. Like this makes no sense, you just learned this dumb thing, they just came out of nowhere, just whatever, I don't care. I didn't care at all. I cared this time, I really did. And I was like, Matron actually did mean something, and especially with the way this disc ends, you see exactly why Matron, like, well, I guess we'll get to it. We'll get to it a little bit later, with how the sorceress works and goes from place to place. But it is often, really good people that end up being sorceresses, right?
Yes.
And that's just kind of how it is. But, understanding that ahead of time, understanding the context that I did not previously understand, hearing their dialogue, it did feel good. It felt better. It felt more real as they were talking. Now there's too many characters talking, and these Japanese RPGs have a bad habit of every time a new thing,
everyone has to have a turn.
Every single person has to say their
have
one
their
line.
turn, yeah.
And it's like, I wish they wouldn't do that. But what they refrain from doing is every one of them, they're all talking amongst each other. Squall's being pretty quiet.
Yeah.
And finally one of them asked him, "Do you remember the Squall?" And he's like, "Yeah."
Yeah,
like,
I was there.
I remember that. Did we light fireworks? Or he brings something up like that.
But here's the other thing is that this kind of brings a question.
It felt like a real reminiscence, you know?
Yeah, this kind of brings it into question though, like, are the GFs really erasing their memories if they remember this?
I know, because they have such immediate access. Once they get a little hint, they can re-access all of it.
Yeah, it's
apparently.
like they all essentially remember it. They all recall it.
So
it's
the
just
GFs
that, like,
didn't really take up the memory.
Yeah,
it really just blocked the memory.
It really confuses me about what GFs and how they affect memory really means. Now they talk about there's a specific part of the brain where the GFs like live when you junction them. That is like your memory center, and that's why it messes with it. But it doesn't do a good enough job of explaining like how they are able to, once it's prompted, to recall
still
something,
recover it.
It's almost like a long-term, short-term memory thing.
Yeah,
but this wouldn't be in their short-term memory. No. It would only be in their long-term memory.
Yeah.
So
it's just it was being blocked. It wasn't being
removed.
So they still do have their memories.
Yeah.
So it is just
I just don't really know how it works.
I know. I don't either. That's fascinating. Actually, that's interesting. So they can still remember all of this stuff.
I don't know.
And all of them can, like right away.
Yeah. As soon as they're prompted,
2
again,
minutes.
as soon as Irvine prompted the memory, and one sparked and said, "Oh yeah," and then "Oh yeah," and they all just started. It just started coming up, but it had to be prompted by something.
You know what?
They wouldn't have recalled it on their own.
You know what I didn't like? They did this thing again that they did in Disc 1, which is they come to the conclusion that, well, even if we keep talking about this, we're not going to be able to figure it out anyways.
Yep, just have to leave.
I
can't figure this out.
I get why they
We're
do
done.
it, but I hate it because how could you... And they decide, oh, let's go to the orphanage, right?
Yeah.
That's like, let's figure this out. Let's go to the orphanage. But they stop talking about it because they're like, well, we don't have a clue what's going on. Let's just move on. Mm-hmm. And I don't love that. But it did feel much more real to me. But you're right, the conclusions, it basically doesn't change anything. It would make a little more sense if it changed something where they were able to say, well, we still have to fight, but let's try to plan a new way
Let's go on a quest
to
find out how to save Edea.
Sure, let's find
rather than
info.
Kill her and then you could do a whole quest line that's all about the sorceress power and how it works and how it's passed on. And how like once the power passes on, the person goes back to being normal again, which is exactly what you see at the end of Disc 2 after you fight Edea. She all of a sudden snaps out of it. And she's talking to them like she recognizes them and knows them, and that she's like their matron mother or whatever.
And she's very proud of them.
and it's like, okay, the sorceress power passed on.
Yeah, it went somewhere.
So they could have had a whole quest built around them discovering how the sorceress's power works.
Yes.
And then okay, we're not going to kill her. We're going
I have a different idea though.
We're going to figure out how to pass this sorceress on.
And it's not by adding something; it's by taking something away.
Okay.
They instead of saying we have to fight, let's kill the sorceress, they could have said, we don't know what we're doing. Let's go to the orphanage and figure this out. Because remember, they weren't planning on fighting the sorceress.
That's true. The Galbadia Garden was just
They didn't go there to kill her.
Yeah.
They were just going, and they got ambushed.
That's a good
on
idea.
The way. And so if you just took out the line, if they really were conflicted, but when it came down to it, they were like, oh shoot, we have to fight. We're getting destroyed. We have to go to their base and fight. Then all of a sudden, oh, here's the Empress Sorceress. Like they don't know what to do. So I don't think you needed to add much. You just need to take away them resolving very convictionally
that we're going to kill
whatever the word is.
Our
that
matron.
they're going to kill the matron. So if you just remove a couple lines of dialogue, then all of a sudden it looks like a complete accident, and they had no choice.
And it looks like we need to go find out what to do. Let's go back to the orphanage.
It would have made perfect sense.
And then they get ambushed on the way. I like that.
That's
a
what they
good
should
idea.
have done.
That's a good idea.
See, there are a few minimal changes, just a few sentences
a tweak.
with the first assassination attempt and with this scene that would have made everything just feel better.
Completely gel.
Feel better.
And that's actually true of my criticisms of the opening cinematic FMV, which we'll get into in a later episode.
Okay.
Just minor tweaks
nice.
would have, I think, taken FF8 from being this highly divisive, just like game where just people just hate it, to it all just works.
Yeah.
And the story is actually very, very cohesive.
If there is that little info that needs to be changed for this game to be considered like really great,
a remake,
then it might
could
actually be.
fix it.
Yes, yes. But I'm also just saying it might really just be a really great game. These are minor things.
That's true.
I mean, they're big. You know, they change.
They're big
massive
in the
story
sense that like
implications.
a person on a first playthrough would have a really bad experience versus a good one.
Depending on, how
Just
they
these
chose
little
whatever.
things that they
Exactly.
screwed the bolt in a little further.
This could be like the best FF game ever.
Sure.
If they were just able to like do a few things differently.
Sure.
Minor things too.
Yeah.
Hey guys, this is me after having recorded the podcast, just inserting a couple of thoughts here. So one thing that really struck me during the orphanage scene, despite all the things that, I've talked about here, there's a part where Squall sees himself as a child being vulnerable, crying, that kind of thing. And he looks at himself and thinks how shameful it is. And this is something that I think is very true for a lot of people too, especially people who are like Squall or who have a personality like his. This looking back on your child self, on former versions of you from the past, and being really ashamed of who you were, being really ashamed of your weakness, being really ashamed of the mistakes that you made, being ashamed of all kinds of things. This is something that I've really had a problem with for a lot of my life. It's very hard for me, for instance, to watch old home videos of me when I was very young, because I'm very embarrassed of who I was as a child. And I don't know, there's just something about this moment that really stuck out to me again. And, for all the criticism and all the hate that Squall gets, I think it's important to throw in here as a counterbalance to all of that I think Squall is written very well for somebody of this personality type. And a lot of what happens in the game, a lot of what he thinks, a lot of what he says, it resonates pretty deeply with me. I can really feel where he's coming from. And this was one of those moments for sure.
So, then you're going, they actually do resolve to go to the orphanage.
Orphanage. And you can see it. It's right there on the cliff.
Yeah.
But
they're still, like you said, they resolve to kill her. But then the Galbadia Garden is there. A big battle's going to happen. It's unavoidable. This is a very exciting set piece. And so
talking about FMVs getting cooler and cooler.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, my gosh, man.
So I'm going to say this first to allow people to know, like, there's a lot of good things in the scene that I really like before I start getting into things I don't like. But it is probably, I've been thinking hard about this. This might be one of the most impressive action set pieces in gaming history, in my opinion.
Sure.
You take away, just from a pure visual action standpoint. I'm not talking about, like, does the context of the story sort of build it up to make the stakes high enough to make it really land, But I'm saying purely visually, cinematically, technologically for the time, this might be the most impressive action piece I have ever seen in a video game my whole life.
Yeah, I think so.
That scene where the flying trooper tackles Squall out of the door, and they're hanging.
And you're hanging, and the whole background.
It's just a huge battle, and they're punching each other on that thing as it's flying, and you're just like flying over this battle in an FMV is just stunning. It's
beautiful.
So awesome.
Yeah, it's incredible.
And the whole build up to it is really good. There's a scene where they're standing kind of at the entrance and they're kind of running away, and you see Galbadia Garden just like freaking crashing into it. All these interactive FMVs really come to a head in like just this insanely impressive visual presentation. The scene is very cool. It's awesome. There's lots of cool things about it.
Visually, there's nothing different I would do.
Yes.
Visually. It is very perfect.
So now let's talk about all the reasons why I hate it.
Me too. It's mostly Rinoa, though. For me,
it's Rinoa.
It's mostly
Rinoa. It's Rinoa. And it's not just
Rinoa.
Rinoa.
She's a rich girl who hadn't really experienced a lot of this stuff,
It's not just Rinoa. It's everybody else because of Rinoa's being there.
Because she wants the lion ring, right? And so
Zell's
in on it. And
they're about to have a battle where people are for sure going to die.
Yes.
The Sorceress is coming.
The whole
with
thing.
Galbadia Garden. We're protecting the garden. They're coming to invade and kill us. We have a bunch of trainees and little kids and stuff.
Yes, young children, yes.
And all of this planning has been placed on a resentful leader who is
17.
like 17 years old
Yeah.
to like plan how they're going to go about protecting their garden and killing the sorceress. The outlook is not good.
No.
It's a looming moment, and our party are all concerned with setting Rinoa and Squall up still.
They really got it.
It just shows this
can't help
total lack of awareness for the situation they're in, for the gravity of it, for their own danger that their own lives are in. I just cannot understand why they care at all right now to plan this elaborate scheme of taking the ring away from Squall to give to Rinoa. I'm going to duplicate this for you, and they're just so concerned about something.
And it
that
all
just,
has to be done right now
right
during this
now
battle.
during this battle.
It cannot wait.
It's so it
incredible.
really irritates me.
The coolest FMV of the whole game, other than the one where they're flying around, that one's cool. But the one where you're just running to the side and there's explosions and the troops are fighting.
Oh, that's awesome.
You're
shot.
just running through the whole
boom,
battle.
boom, and there's like a guy on a motorcycle gets like knocked off.
Yes, and oh man, and it keeps getting cooler and cooler and more intense. As soon as you're at the end of that, boom, you just walk past this huge battle. Probably a dozen people died like in the background right there while you were watching. And Rinoa was like, "Hey Squall, what's that logo on your ring? Is that a monster?" He's like, "No, it's a lion."
Yeah.
Oh, really? That's cool. And she's like doing the heel thing
Yeah,
where she's like kicking the
like,
ground with her
being
tippy
flirty.
toe. And she's like looking away.
It's just like, people are dying right now. You just ran past people dying. People
Literally.
being shot and stabbed and screaming their death cries.
Blown up. When an explosion happens,
my God.
I mean,
what are you doing?
I've only seen like movies, but I've seen like one of the most impressive, but not in that sense.
Oh, okay.
One of the biggest impressions I have from any Hollywood movie was Saving Private Ryan, and it's because of the way those mortars were hitting the beach that it would just tear apart the body. And veterans would come out of that movie with PTSD because they were saying this was the most accurate portrayal of the invasion of Normandy that they've ever seen. And they were like, that's really how it was. And it's jacked up. I almost threw up when I first watched it because I was like 15 or 14.
Yeah.
And it's graphic. And people, when bombs go off, there's shrapnel and burns, and just the shockwave of the bomb ripples through your body and can just mess you up like really bad without you even being hit by anything. Yeah. And so it's an absolute disaster. And there are bombs going off here hitting like people as far as I can tell, just boom right on them. And she is just having this moment with him, and he is trying to do the right thing, which is ignore her
and care about the lives of the people who are his responsibility.
Yeah.
And this is what irritates me about the scene.
People are going to get the wrong idea about us, aren't they? And the dialogue that he says back is, "It sounds like you want people to get the wrong idea about us." Like she's just being silly, playing this game, flirting, and she's just got her own her head's in the clouds.
Remember how earlier in Disc 1 you were irritated by the Timber Owls for not taking it seriously enough? And then when
that times 100.
When Squall gave voice to that, it was like, ooh, yes, you're finally saying what should be said.
He was the bad guy for doing that.
Now, I hate everybody in the party except Squall for not doing that.
Yeah.
In the one moment in the game where you really should care about the lives of other people and be doing everything possible to like, you're responsible, you're leading these people. And Squall is the only one who is actually taking that seriously. He's the only one.
He's the only one.
And they keep trying to get him to like, go. You have to go save Rinoa. This really bothered me. I wrote it down. I put it all in caps because it was bothering me so much. Right. You have to save Rinoa. You have to save Rinoa. She's gonna die. You can do it right now. Like, I can't do it. You have to do it. You gotta save her. And then it's like, okay, fine. I will go. And then Dr. Cotta, whatever her name is, hey, why don't you give a speech to the whole school right now? And so
aren't you forgetting something? Yeah.
Dude, her freaking grip strength.
Yeah, for a while.
She's hanging there for at least 10 minutes.
Yeah.
Which I've been going to the gym a lot this year. I do a lot of pull-ups and things. I have pretty good grip strength. Sitting there and hanging by your weight for 10 minutes is not something that average people can do.
She's like 100 pounds though.
But also, The Galbadia Garden slams into it while she's sitting there holding on.
I think multiple times.
There's no way she held on that long. But I'll look past that because that's not even the most egregious thing. Yeah. It's that they keep pestering you about this, and he keeps saying, "I have a responsibility to everyone here,
There's a lot of people
just
dying.
her."
And then they're like, I can't believe you don't care about her.
They're trying to make him feel bad, like he's doing the wrong thing morally.
So
because he's not sacrificing the lives of all these kids to go save one person who is an idiot for even being here in the first place, because she shouldn't be here, and they shouldn't be caring about the romantic relationship in the middle of a battle where people are getting cut to pieces and dying. And it's just the tone of it is so off.
Yeah, it's so bad, and I agree 100% with all of that. It's a mess. It's so hard to watch. Because, and then you know they're doing it on purpose. At this point, you know that the writers are like, this is, we want to do this.
Yeah.
Because the thing with Timber and all the other stuff that's happened up to this point, and with the missile infiltration and all that stuff, they are on purpose doing this and having it just kind of be silly, but super serious at the same time.
Yeah.
For whatever reason, that's what they wanted to do.
Yeah.
So this is very good criticism for them. Because they accomplished their goal, and it's just not good. Sorry, I know we're not supposed to be saying that necessarily, but they did what they wanted to do, as far as I can tell, and they shouldn't have wanted to do it.
That's a good thing to bring up.
They could have accomplished it in a different way. Have your humor be before and after the battle, not during the battle.
Yeah.
That shouldn't happen, and especially with Squall. And I love the way he saves Rinoa. It didn't seem to me like he was going to do it on purpose. He just happened to, this thing knocked him off, and then he got it. He just happens to ride the thing up and catch her on his way back after he punches the dude out. You know, it's not like it didn't seem as though he was necessarily going after her to rescue her in the first place. I think he did resolve to do that, but. The way it happened, it seemed totally just by chance. He's like, oh, I'm here now. Okay, here we go.
I happen to be here. I'm saving.
So great.
Yeah. Okay, so now that I've gotten all that off my chest, I'm going to give the olive branch. I'm going to extend the olive branch a little bit, okay? Because I did think about this a lot more. These are my genuine feelings about the scene. It really bugs me. No matter how many times I play it, I just do not like the way that the scene is written. I don't think it's appropriate to the tone. Right. But I'm going to extend the olive branch now. And that is to say that I think what they might have been trying to do is really set up the burden of leadership. So the fact that everyone is pestering him,
about
pestering him, pestering him. You have to do this. You have to take control. I don't know what to do. I can't save her. You have to do it. 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 He's getting to a boiling point emotionally where he cannot handle all the stress of taking responsibility for everything. And that's going to lead to why he chooses to do what he does at the beginning of Disc 3. So I will say that thinking about the scene a little bit more this time, it's like maybe that's what they're going for.
Right.
So maybe they're meant to be irritating. Maybe they're meant to not be taking it seriously. And he's getting irritated with them for putting all of the onus on this on him. Mm-hmm. Guys, just stop internally boiling up. And that's going to lead. I could see that being possibly the intention.
I see that on the part of everyone but Rinoa.
Yes.
I see that with everyone else putting this leadership on him. And she does do that to some extent, but she doesn't ask much of him other than that he open up at the worst times is when she asks that of him, which is a lot. But she's more or less trying to push him to like explain to him, people like you, people want you to be leader. She's not the one necessarily asking him to do as much. She was back in Timber.
Yeah.
She was very annoying back in Timber. This one, she just wants him to lay down in bed with her, and she doesn't care when it happens. And that's all she wants. And he is busy, right? He can't do that right now.
Yeah.
But that's all she wants, and it's not so much the leadership thing for her. I think you could make that argument for all of the other characters and how it's really grinding his his patience down.
Yeah.
But she does it to a whole new level because she's not demanding any leadership qualities from him. She just wants
what she wants.
She wants what she wants. And unfortunately, it's just incredibly naive. But like she is naive, like I mentioned
But
before.
these are
She's
teenagers.
the daughter of a general, and she's got this fantasy about what battles are like, having not really been in them before.
That is a common thread. Yeah. You have Seifer, who has these very naive, teenage-like dreams and aspirations that he's like allowed to his ego to run away with. You have her kind of doing that. There is an argument to be made that these are kids, and they're just really kind of dumb and naive.
It's incredibly frustrating to watch.
They just can't seem to grasp the gravity of what's going on around them. I can hear that point of view and go, I see where you're coming from. Sure. And if you can like accept the scene for that reason, okay. If you can accept the scene for the reason that this is all about the burden of responsibility, maybe like a major theme of the game, him trying to avoid his responsibility or not wanting to be responsible for others. I think that there are bits of this that work towards that goal and that do strengthen that as a theme. It's just really irritating to watch these people not give a living fetch about a single other human life because there's just so many people.
Other than it's like little tribal group.
Just imagine, even as a teenager, even as a naive person, a lot of these guys at the Normandy run were teenagers, right? They're 19 or whatever.
Oh, true, yeah.
They were kids.
Drafted.
Imagine them trying to get one of their friends to get together during the middle of that run. I can't imagine it.
I don't know.
I can't imagine it for a second, that the horror. Now, I know, again, we read all of this in the developers' interviews. They didn't want to create a dark story this time. Final Fantasy VII was dark and heavy, and they didn't want to do that this time. They wanted something more lighthearted, something that was more, just lighter in general. So I'm not saying you make the Galbadia versus Balamb Garden into Saving Private Ryan. You're not trying to like horrify people with this. But what I'm saying is that you got to have some acknowledgement.
You have to acknowledge it. I think because you mentioned the theme, right? The theme of leadership. Well, they missed a big, very important moral theme, I think, which is the story. I don't know if this is, I don't know who. I think this is a story that everyone hears growing up. Yeah. But it could just be the church I went to or whatever. But there's the guy, there's the train tracks, and there's the deaf kid running on the tracks, and there's like a train of 20 people coming.
What is it's an experiment.
It's a moral dilemma, but I can't remember the...
It's the something experiment. I can't remember the name
of it. This is a common thing then, right? So the guy's got to choose. Do I save my one kid who doesn't know a train's coming and is on the tracks, or do I
kill
save
the
20
people
or whatever? So the idea is... And in the story, as the story goes, my understanding is that he sacrifices the kids so
to
that
save the one,
the few to save the many, right?
Yeah.
So that the whole train of people can live, and that there's a lesson in there because that is considered to be more moral behavior. It's sacrificial behavior, but you're saving more people, whatever. There's a lesson to be learned in there in ethics and morality, just in general, and they they purposefully just skip over that lesson here. If the battle weren't so well done, if it weren't so epic and good, like visually impressive, this maybe wouldn't be such an issue we have. If this were done the way the other Final Fantasy battles are done, which is not FMVs, just, well, older FF, just a battle,
the abstract,
the music, and the camera goes and you're in the battlefield. If it was that kind of battle, we may have forgiven it more. But because it was so realistic, and those bombs going off and all the people fighting, and because you got to see it and because that was so well done, it really kind of screwed up their story, I think. Yeah. Sometimes the best shot isn't the right shot for your story. And I think in Final Fantasy VIII there's a good lesson here where the story they were trying to tell was not well accompanied by the most impressive battle scene, as you mentioned, we'd ever seen up to that point in a video game.
Yeah. So
that's all I got to say about that.
The last part of my notes I'm going to save for next time because it's going to really kind of tie into the beginning of Disc 3 a little bit more. But just in wrapping up, they go fight the Sorceress. The power, the influence that was affecting her seems to pass.
But also Seifer's there, and the Sorceress kind of just kicks Seifer aside. She's like, you're useless.
Yep.
And that was a gut punch for Seifer.
Yep. And so there's a part where Rinoa kind of goes over to Seifer to help him, and you see in Squall's thoughts kind of like, oh, and he's like a big like a bunch of ellipses and then a big exclamation mark, like she's going to help him and like Rinoa and Seifer, they had like a thing. There's a little bit of a hint of jealousy I feel like might be sparked there. But I'm going to save that for next time. The important thing is that the power of the Sorceress, the influence of the Sorceress passes off of Edea. She's back to normal, and we're left on this cliffhanger where Quistis is like, something's wrong with Rinoa.
Rinoa, she's kind of...
Squall, get over here, something's wrong with her.
Yeah.
And then the disc comes to an end. So that's going to wrap it up for today.
Man.
And we'll talk more about the Squall and Rinoa relationship because it's going to really start taking off as like a major focus of the story right at the beginning of Disc 3. And there's going to be some crazy stuff that happens. So I wanted to ask you about this too. Mm-hmm. I was thinking about just finishing the game.
Oh.
And wrapping up our Final Fantasy VIII discussion.
It's going to be a long podcast next month.
Because I think Disc 4 is mostly just the final dungeon.
Yeah, it's mostly the FMV and then the final, that part.
I think that we are...
I think you're right.
About 2/3 of the way through the game.
Yeah.
So maybe a little more than that. Maybe like 70%. Something like that. So...
Okay. I can do that. That would be good.
I think if we finish the game next time, and then the following podcast will be going over the comments and talk about the things we missed along the way. That would be February, and then March's podcast, and then we'll start a new game after that in April.
Okay, cool.
So that's what we're gonna do. Finish the game.
Good.
Beat the game, and we'll finish going through all the events and having a cutscene, and we'll just do one more follow-up podcast to that. And then we'll move on to the next thing. Thanks for watching, everybody. So these are deep. These are long.
They're fun.
But again, if we hit that goal on Patreon, like I was talking about earlier, we'll bring these out more often. We'll get to where we're doing them weekly, and then they won't be quite so dense. So, we'll be able to break them up a little bit more, and make them a little bit more digestible. But we're glad you guys are enjoying the new format. We're really enjoying it. This is really, really fun. And looking forward to finishing the game and finishing up our thoughts on FF8. Till then, peace out. We appreciate all of you. Bye-bye.